2, 3. Never say 3, 2, 1. Never say 2, 1.
So we're going on 3, or we're going on?
How's it going, everybody?
3.
We're on now.
Guys, you're nodding.
Guys, you're nodding.
So Wayne's World.
How's it going, everybody? We made it to episode 34 tonight. Happy Whiskey Wednesday.
I can say we made it.
We made it.
Good news, everyone.
We're not dead. We're still here.
The landing gear is down, and looks like we're going to pull through here. So, local time is... No.
We got some interesting stuff for you tonight, but we'll get into that once we start the audio portion of the podcast. But before we get started, we always like to tell you to like this video. Please share it, and please tell a friend about it, and create the conversation that you guys always do. We love that about this community that we've started, and we thank you guys for tuning in every Wednesday and giving us your support. So,
yeah. Good call.
Ready?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Ready, Mike?
Yeah, go ahead and share. Actually, I'm going to share this right now. Before we get started, I'm going to do it right now.
Yep.
Mike, if you're on there, Dustin, everyone else, if you guys could share it. Tony, Kevin, there is an opportunity to share this on your feed. We'll do it early. Right, message. Tune in now. These guys suck. Mike Fry, SUX. Alright.
Cool. Ready?
I'm putting it on CBC.
All right.
Right.
Yeah, perfect. What's up, Aaron? How's it going, man? It's good to hear from you. It's been probably a long time since we've seen each other.
All right, ready to roll?
What's up, Che? Ready?
Michael?
I am ready, sir.
Cool. Hello, everyone, and happy Whiskey Wednesday. Welcome to the Bourbon and BS podcast. This is episode 34. I'm Jake Sanders, along with my co-host Steve Crane.
Hello.
How's it going, man?
It's going well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good week for the most part.
Yeah.
Ups and downs.
Ups and
But yeah, overall, it's been good. It's been raining a lot.
It has been. We just stopped. That hurricane went through. Basically.
Not a hurricane. You can't say that this time of the year. Like, it's not an actual
Too soon.
It's just a rainstorm.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an actual hurricane that came through, but we weren't really...
Affected.
Not at all. Well, except for rain.
Got it.
So, sorry you got wet. Everyone that got wet in Columbus, Ohio. Now it's fall, though, which it absolutely is fall. It's awesome.
Yeah. It's a perfect time for the women to start screaming and get their spice lattes and Uggs.
Sure. No, yeah.
Too soon? Whatever. I'm happy. It's been a long week. Finally started my new job, my new office job. I've entered the corporate world.
Nice.
But a lot of studying. I got to get some licensing and stuff. But it's been fun. And we would like to introduce our guest of the evening, returning guest of the evening, Mike Fry. Thanks for joining.
Hello.
So this is your third? Is this your third episode?
Third, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I think you were on the very, very first one. So everyone listening, if you want to go all the way back to the very, very first episode, go check that out. And that was a really good conversation.
It was
for
epic.
what it was.
It was great. It was natural. We didn't even know we were going to do it that night, or I didn't show up.
Yeah.
And he's like, let's do the podcast. I'm like, oh.
That was when Josh was still, around and a part of it. And
He's
now
still alive.
He's still alive. He's made it too, folks.
Jesus.
I saw him the other day.
He's never here.
I know, but the way you said it, it's just, when he was still with us and, Josh,
I said he was around.
this one's for you, buddy.
What? Anyways, we're glad to have you back on, Mike.
Thanks
you
for
just
having
had a new book come out, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But we do want to tell you we're sipping on Kentucky Spirit. It is the state of Ohio pick.
I have not poured that yet.
I haven't either. We're sipping on Eagle Rare, which you know that we love that. That's my daily drinker for as much as I know of, and so we're gonna do the Kentucky Spirit, our wild turkey. What the Epoch? Am I saying that?
Don't you're like doing like a weird accent though.
Yeah.
Epoch.
Epoch.
Just
Cool.
Just read it.
By Nat Sherman.
It is.
Okay.
Made exclusively
For
for Nat Sherman. It's the new. This is the old one. It's actually the same band, but it's going to be a secondary band on all the Nat Sherman stuff.
Yeah. So I'm really interested to hear about this. We've already lit this up, and we're excited to. I'm excited to hear about it more. I know Mike already likes it, so.
Mikey likes it.
Mikey likes it. Yes,
And
sir.
our topic of the evening is going to be being creative too.
Yeah, it's.
Which is perfect for having Mike on here.
That's kind of where it came from. Is that having Mike do this? He's self-published. Is that?
That's correct.
correct?
Yes, first one. Hopefully, the next one will be published by someone else.
Nice.
Well, we'll get to that. But I mean, the overall thing is, you did this. You wrote it. It took you some time. You've been wanting to do it, and so to kind of make it a podcast topic is being creative, and I think that's a big part of it. But we can obviously spend more time on the actual book. And actually, the topic of the book, I think, is clearly, as you know, and that's the whole point of the book, is that it is all about conversation, perception, personal
Narrative.
favoritism, also like
Yes.
being a fan.
Emotion,
So we'll talk
yeah.
about all that stuff. But
Yeah.
being creative is what actually put that out there, which is fantastic.
It's awesome. And we always like to tell you before we get started, you're listening to this, so please like it. Please download it on iTunes or on Spotify and Overcast on Android devices.
Yeah.
So please download it. That's how we get our analytics going, and that's how we get our sponsorships. And we're really trying to make this thing big to where we want it. And with your guys' support, we'll hopefully get there. So, and we want to thank our sponsors of the evening. So please, please thank you, Tinderbox Decent, for providing our first cigar of the night, the Epoch and the Reserva Real of the Roman Julieta.
Yeah, Roman Julieta, yeah, Altadis is our sponsor, so we appreciate that. Second Smoke, we actually were going to get to this last week, but we did the whole Cuba trip and just stuck with the cigars that Brad had bought, which was awesome. But the Reserva Real is a great blend from Altadis. This is interesting with the Epoch. Happy to have Mike on, but Kylie from Nat Sherman was originally scheduled to be on, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but respectfully she had to actually back out because they were purchased by, I guess Altria is how you say it, but it's a big company for the Nat Sherman cigarettes. Well then, in turn, they acquired the cigar side of it. They've made some big changes. The big thing, from my understanding, is that for that company, they didn't necessarily want her to like say mild, because all these FDA, kind of more bullshit things, like the real soft stuff, I guess, like treating adults. And I know there's a lot of adults that are idiots, but I mean, like when it comes down to it, it's mild. It's not like it's a diet cigar. It's not like a low calorie or low nicotine necessarily. There is technically less nicotine in some milder cigars. But the same thing is that they don't want to be able to come across as something where it's like they are encouraging it. They can't even, I guess, say, what'd you say, like easygoing or something. It's like the fuck, you know what I mean? It's like absolutely terrible. So I didn't want to put her in that spot, but she was gracious enough. She was at the Tinderbox today, who's that sponsor that Jake was talking about where we work, and dropped these off, these Epochas, which is the original namesake, at least. It's not the exact original blend. But it's the original namesake from the first cigar that Nat Sherman. The way she put it was a man, then it was a store, I think, or like a thing, and then it was a cigar. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like Nat Sherman, then they did a store, and I think it was his wife did like I don't know another product in there, and then he decided like, well, why am I buying these other cigars? And so why don't we just like come out with our first, So he acquired this, I think, Epoch. Yeah. And then down the line, it just kind of carried on, and I don't know if it came back and all that stuff. I'm going to try to kind of glance over all the history here, but yeah, so it's been around forever, and that's why this is, like, if you look at the boxes up until recently, I think they're going to keep some of it on the new one, but they are actually keeping, like, the original artwork from the old school boxes on the current ones.
I'll have to look at those, because I haven't been around long enough to see what those were, but yeah.
So I've already dove in the cigar a little bit, but...
What do you want to dive into? No. We normally do the whiskey first. And do you want to stay on that?
Let's do the whiskey.
Okay. All right. Well, like as we speak, actually, I'm texting Ian Demick, that is a good friend of mine. Steve, have you met Ann yet?
I have not. We've been wanting to have her on here. I know she's been trying or isn't able to.
She's a little shy. She doesn't want to be on, but she definitely wants to donate a bottle. She's actually going to donate a rare Kentucky Spirit pick for us. But Dustin Bovey, he's the guy that is kind of behind the scenes. He's been on a lot of our podcasts, so you know him to be our kind of producer and kind of helping behind the scenes thing, so on and so forth. So thanks, man, for bringing this Kentucky Spirit from Wild Turkey. His girlfriend Kathy actually got it for him, so thank you, Kathy, for getting it. But it's really neat because the historical essence of this is the fact that Kentucky Spirit has never been released in the state of Ohio before. So it's really neat. And what Ann has been telling me is that this bottle, there was, so kind of a background story, sorry I'm jumping around, but so the state of Ohio went in February of 2018, went down to Wild Turkey, picked 8 separate barrels with Jimmy Russell, the older gentleman, the original Wild Turkey master distiller, and then his son that has recently taken over pretty much. They're kind of partners, but Eddie's kind of like the main guy now. They picked 8 barrels, and they were kind of scattered around the state of Ohio, releasing this past Friday. So the one that we actually have is Warehouse C&A on the 4th floor. So what that means is that it actually didn't come from the distillery grounds. This warehouse C&A, was actually on it was actually owned by Four Roses. So the barrel is Wild Turkey, distillate, juice, everything, but it was housed in Four Roses warehouses. I was trying to ask Ian, I think, so it came from Camp Nelson, but I don't think that this is, if you go down there, Four Roses Distillery, if you go down to the distillery, across the street you'll see warehouses that aren't really, there's barrels in them, but I think that has been bought by Wild Turkey, but I don't think this is the said warehouse that I'm speaking of. But it's really, really cool. We haven't even got to taste it yet, really, so I'm gonna pour myself a drink and pour the rest of the guys a drink. But actually, almost 2 decades ago, Wild Turkey took over that rick house. So the new release, the 2002, remember Steve last week, or was that last week? Yeah, Tuesday.
Oh yeah.
They did the 2002 Russell's single barrel raffle here in the state of Ohio in Columbus, and people went nuts over it. My parents actually went, and have you ever had Russell's, Mike?
I have not, no.
Well, I know Steve and I love it.
Very good, yeah.
It's very, very good. It's got a lot of great notes to it. And what's going on?
Dustin brought the bottle. He
Yeah.
for it.
My girlfriend brought it, so of course I'm gonna have a glass.
I know you wanted some. I was waiting.
My understanding was that you had to be on camera.
No, it's not true. They just pour it all over the laptop. There.
Is that not where it goes?
That's
That's
fine.
what
You got a whole cooler over there.
So?
I'll just get the bottle over here then.
That's fine. We weren't gonna drink all of it anyway, so
I'll just pull out a straw and just.
make sure it's paper. God forbid it's plastic.
No, it's gonna be a metal straw.
Oh, that's, man, as long as you wash it, I guess. I don't know.
It's still recyclable.
Go
I
on,
guess.
go on.
Yeah,
all right.
The Camp Nelson that I had is lovely. So, and that's what Ann said. So these, like I said, it's kind of weird because there was a lot of barrels and a lot of different places that it came from. But Wild Turkey's located in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. But based off the notes, I've loved Kentucky Spirit from the first time that I tried it, which was actually when I went down there for my 21st birthday.
Right.
And this was the one that my dad and I really, during the taste test, this was the one that we kind of both picked out and said that was amazing. But right off the bat, this one, I get a lot of berries. There there's, you know, just to geek out for a second.
Do it.
There's some cinnamon, a little bit of vanilla, and there's a weird like toffee note behind there.
This is all in the nose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as you can hear, right? It's like, yeah, no, I got clear nasal passage. Hey.
But tasting it is all floral berries, very light, fruity. But it has a nice, it definitely coats your tongue. It's all like it's on the tip of my tongue, so it's very sweet. It is, I believe, yeah. So it's 101 proof. So it's 50%. Which I think is just about right. And I believe these, I forget how old they are. They're around, I'd say 8 to 10.
Is it on the bottle at all?
No.
Cool. That's helpful.
Yep.
Lovely.
Yeah.
But that's good. So I mean, the cool thing is too. I mean, there's got that handwritten part of it too, which I always like to see. It says the bourbon whiskey was bottled on 7/31/18 from barrel number 289.
Let's see,
stored
that
in Warehouse A.
Warehouse A.
On Rick number 4.
So that did
50.
That did come from Camp Nelson.
Okay.
So Camp Nelson, there's Warehouse A and Warehouse F.
Mm-hmm.
And then Lawrenceburg has, that's the distillery, is Warehouse K, which I think is their oldest rick house on campus. Basically.
Okay.
So, which is really, really cool. But out of these 8 barrels, speaking with Ann, you know, just to give a little bit of background on Ann, she is a huge Wild Turkey fan. I believe she reps for them somewhat, but she does stuff high up with the Ohio State of Commerce with their liquor department. So she knows when all this stuff's coming in, which is awesome. She's a great friend to have and a great person. But she was telling me that...
Is she listening right now? Ann, are you listening?
No, she's not, I don't think.
Cool.
But what she was telling me is that the ones from Warehouse K and the ones from Camp Nelson, they taste completely different, which is interesting. So
Really?
That's like what we talk about.
Different locations.
Yeah, different locations. We've talked about the different rick houses and where they can be set up at, and what all this maturing and the aging process, and even the weather and the wood, all of it comes into play.
Yeah, the way the sun hits it, I'm sure is something, you know, throughout the day. As it, you know, is it always in direct sunlight? I would assume that would affect it. But yeah, the surrounding. It's similar to a point of, you know, as far as fields. You know, even like lots on the same farm will yield different types of tobacco. John Gibson asked us, so how does it taste?
I think it tastes amazing. And Ann was actually telling me right now, and I agree with her. She says the Camp Nelson barrels are delicate, which is what we just said.
Okay.
Right? Very sweet, has sweets, and doesn't have those deep undertones.
It certainly doesn't.
Yeah, but it definitely coats your tongue, but it doesn't have that classic, I don't know, Wild Turkey edge to it.
You said like vanilla. It's almost like for me, it's like a butterscotch like coating.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of got that.
Like a Werther's candy.
I had like 3 of them before the podcast, but
Did you?
I think it's unrelated.
It might coat the palate
Might be
a little
hanging
bit.
on your...
No, I don't think so. You clearly don't know what you're talking about. But
He seems like the guy who'd have a candy dish of Werther's and spice drops.
Usually half open in my pocket type thing.
I get the toffee that you're talking about.
Yeah.
That seems...
It's really on the back. And
Yeah,
like
yeah.
once you, here's a trick, and I learned this the last time I went down there, is, I know we're smoking cigars, but after you take a sip, actually take a deep breath and kind of just act like you're fogging up like a glass or something, and you actually you'll get all those tastes back.
Wait, say that again. Walk. Like
So
take a drink, swallow it.
yeah, you swallow it.
Okay.
So without taking another drink, you do.
Should I do the drink now?
Do it.
Okay, do the drink now.
We're gonna do this together.
Mike, get in here.
So take a
Well,
drink.
you can't do it and
Cheers.
talk, can you?
Yeah, I can.
All right.
Cheers.
So taste a little bit. You're getting the taste buds. Probably take. Is there anything else that you pick out that you had differently from the first time?
Not really.
Yeah. So So breathe lightly in, like
Through your mouth.
yeah, through your mouth.
Don't look at me when you do it. It's weird.
Just stay focused.
And then act as if you're trying to fog up a glass. So is there any
Yeah. This is great audio, by the way.
well, you guys are like looking at each other while you're doing it.
I looked away. I could tell he was still looking at me. That's all I'm gonna say. It's uncomfortable.
All I was gonna say is that's a technique. Without taking another sip, you may be able to get other notes and different tastes out of it.
I got a lot more sweetness from it.
Yeah.
Really?
A lot of sweetness from it. Kind of like a maple syrup, kind of like real sugary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
With like hints, you still get the fruit notes to it.
I agree with what Ann said though. This is definitely not. It doesn't have that classic wild turkey bite. You know how we
no, not at all.
always say about like the Russells and stuff like that, the single barrel, and even the 10-year.
Yeah.
The 10-year is more potent than the single barrel, but I think.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things we've talked about a million times.
It's good. I mean, what was the last one? I think you mentioned this. What was the last time we did this? Was that the?
We did the Prohibition pick.
Okay.
Of the Russell single barrel that Elton did.
And then we flipped
And
on.
then we, alongside the Kentucky Spirit that
Which
he
the
did.
story there, if I recall, was they were supposed to be flip flops.
They were supposed to be flipped.
So like, what was in each bottle initially, the thought was that they would be in the opposite.
Yeah.
But then.
Was it a mistake? Or?
No, it's that when they taste it, and I think that's the way when we talked about it, that podcast episode was that it's interesting that it takes it all the way down to, especially when they're doing like single barrels and stuff, when you have different lines, when the mash bills are so similar or almost the same, if you will.
Yeah.
Like it can be literally barrels next to each other taste more like what they want this product to taste like, and that's like where they're trying to be consistent, right? You know what I mean? Like, oh, this is more like pure Kentucky as opposed to Russell's, and vice versa. And that was the whole story there, is that they actually decided to flip it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
So, Mike, just so you know, a lot of the times with these big conglomerates, like Wild Turkey, Woodford Reserve, Buffalo Trace, and Jim Beam and such, when they do a lot of these single barrels, some of their bottles are the same mash bill. So what they do is the only difference between the different bottles is that it's proof down, and the fact that the master distiller and the taster was like, no, this is that and this is that.
Yeah.
But the intention of that Prohibition pick was that they were right beside each other, and they were both going to, one was going to be a Russell's single barrel, and the other was going to be a Kentucky Spirit. Well, they tasted them, and they were actually opposite. And they tasted completely different, which was absolutely insane considering the mash bill was the same. They were dumped they were put in the barrel on the same day. They were aged the same day, dumped on the same day, sitting basically next side by side.
Yeah.
And they tasted completely different. So
Crazy.
But yeah, I mean, what do you think, Mike? Is there anything else that you think of this?
Like I said, I am not as refined in my ability to.
Really, anyway.
In really any area of my
I'm
life.
just not refined. Let's just call it
just
that.
not a refined person.
Would you say crude's the opposite of refined?
Crude at times,
You're the writer.
95% of the time. 5% elegance in there, you know. Like I said, the Werthers, the toffee, I'm getting a lot of that. Like more on the back end, but as far as the specific notes, yeah, I mean, I'd just be BSing you, no pun intended. It is good. Again, I've said this on the show multiple times. I like something that is smoother, and this is the third time I've been on the show, and it's smooth.
You like it? Okay.
It doesn't make you wince.
Yeah.
I don't like to wince when I'm drinking, just like the cigars. I just, I want to enjoy myself, not make that face.
We don't want you to make that face either.
It's a bad face.
I agree. Fix it.
You can confuse people if they don't.
Typically.
Well, if you guys have any more questions about this barrel, shoot us a message over Instagram or email us. And even on our live, you guys ask more questions and we'll get to them. But I'm sure Steve is dying to tell us about the
Really not.
Epoch, so,
Really not.
by Nat Sherman. So, what about?
So I just reviewed the facts. And so this actually, I was mistaken in the intro a little bit. this was originally the cigar, right? Back in like 1929 or whatever it was, late 20s.
Like the only cigar?
It was like for Nat Sherman.
Oh.
For Nat Sherman, so this was the original cigar in the world.
That was a joke, I'm not very funny.
So these are from 1929.
They found them in a cave.
Yeah, when cigars were created. No, God damn it. So
They're still praying for rain.
Yes, exactly.
anyways, so this was re-released actually in 2014.
Oh.
So, but this is made by Quesada, which a lot of the Nat Sherman stuff is made by Quesada cigars down in the DR. It's got an Ecuadorian Connecticut shade on the outside. It's got a Dominican
binder.
I think Nicaraguan binder actually. I gotta look that back up.
Okay.
Because basically Nicaraguan and Dominican underneath, which is pretty typical for Quesada stuff. But it's, let's see, what does it say here? Yeah, it's Nicaraguan and Dominican along with the Ecuadorian wrapper. So
I just want to say hi, Paul. Thanks for joining.
Paul Waller, thank you.
Yep.
But the interesting thing, I was hoping that, and maybe Paul knows this, but basically Nat Sherman acquired the cigar company from the Schwab brothers and Bayer. Now it doesn't say it in this one, but my recollection is that he literally won it in a poker game.
That's awesome.
So you win, like,
And a backdoor draw.
fast forward this many years later, this was a bad night at the table with a bunch of probably fairly well-off people.
Wow.
You're like, you can have my cigar or my shop, you know what I mean? And then it's like, so that's how that went. But it's a very good cigar, I think. This is Dominican binder, Nicaraguan Dominican filler. And so I will say, this is not one that we carry at the tinderbox. This was a gift from Kylie, our Nat Sherman rep. Calm down.
It's good. I like
It is good. So the issue for us for a lot of Nat Sherman stuff is that they've gone through some transitions over the last several years. So like for us, a retailer in the Midwest, Columbus, Ohio, we do get asked for some of the Nat Sherman stuff, and over the last several years, we've tried some different things. And so I think it was 2 years ago when Brian and I were out at the trade show in Las Vegas. Paul says that's a new story for me. Might have made that up, but I'm pretty sure it's true. Anyway, we were smoking some of the things we liked in that. Like, so in the shop we carry the Timeless Nicaragua, which is everything's gone through a rebranding with Nat Sherman.
We had that on an episode.
Did we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Nat Sherman Timeless Nicaragua is great. I think it's a great cigar. The Timeless Dominican we had for a while didn't sell as well for us. We do have the Metropolitan Habano, which I think is a great medium body cigar. Great price point. And then we just brought on, after Kylie was in today, the Metropolitan Maduro, which was an interesting cigar. I liked it. Like when I first lit it up, it changed like almost right away. Like my palate got used to it. But it was one of those that it kind of came back the second half for me. And it's different enough. It's not like one of those overpowering, what people think when they look at it with a very dark, almost obscuro wrapper. It's more of a very medium plus Maduro. It's very good. So Bob Keller asked, does the Quesada have an Oktoberfest this year? I have not heard. So I doubt our Quesada rep, I think that's still impact for us, but we have not carried that for a while, but we can always look at picking up a box or so for you there, Bob. And but anyways, with the Epoch, I think it's a great cigar. I think it's medium bodied.
What's the price point on something like this?
That, again, not carried. I don't know. Let me look here if they say it.
I think it's really good, though.
And again, if we get Kylie on, I know she's going to try to listen for part of it. So if Kylie jumps on here, so it says back in 2014 or whatever, it was suggested retail price. You're in that $9 to $11 range, I think, called that. Yeah. So 10, just over 10.
This is what, a 6 by 52?
Yeah, about 52.
Yeah.
So it's a good cigar. It's a kind of an all-American company that just got bought out. Their big thing is that they're really big into cigarettes as well. So the fact that they're into that, they actually really are taking things differently from the FDA rulings. And so that's where one of those things where you're seeing, like they've taken some of their cigarettes off of the catalog, I guess. So they had Fantasias, which were very popular because they were very different. They were multiple colors. So like when you open up the pack, and not only is it a gold pack that said Fantasia with different colored letters, each cigarette was like a gold filter, the top part, and then it was like yellow, I think there was a black, there's a hot pink fun cigarettes. Genius. If you're already a smoker, like, whatever, you might as well have fun with it. But the big thing with the FDA is that they do not want people to want to smoke because it's fun or they don't think it's bad for you, which I get to a point, but so you can't say mild, you can't say any of that stuff, so they had to take some of their stuff off. They had, like, naturals was one of the lines of the cigarettes. Now that's called the originals, because you can't say,
You can't say that.
you can't, yeah, so they're hardcore, and that's where, with all of these cigars now, if you see any of the new Nat Shermans, not only did they rebrand it, but like the Epoch here, has the same original band, but even that one underneath says, made exclusively for Nat Sherman International, because they're trying to differentiate enough that they don't jeopardize their bigger business with it, which is cigarettes, for the cigars. Which I get to a point from a business standpoint, but it's silly again that you have to go through all the. Basically, you're putting out the same product, putting more money to get the same product out there that was already out there, and you're going back to a product. Yes, this isn't the same one, but that's essentially a redesigned product of something the best they could from 1929, 1930s, but almost 100 years later, it's like, hang on a second, you can't do it that way anymore because...
You'd have to be miserable when you smoke it.
That's it. Yeah. There's no skull and crossbones on it yet, but, we're not that far off is something to look forward to.
I think it's really good.
Well, yeah, I mean,
This poison cigar is very good.
Stop.
What do you think of it, Mike?
Literally losing
I would say not quite.
You just taste smoke? You're like Brandon Karst all over
I'm
again.
getting notes of cherry,
He's just here to talk about it.
hints of leather dipped in caramel. Fantastic.
That's a whiskey, right?
Earth. I think it's a mix of both at this
I
point.
thought it was barnyard.
Is there some slight
No, I would
Do
say.
you like the cigar, yes or no?
Yeah, I do like the
All right,
cigar.
moving on.
you're done.
I would say it's definitely more mild to medium in my opinion. I wouldn't say
Yeah.
quite medium,
Not medium.
but mild to medium, pleasant flavor. When I smoke cigars, it's all about flavor. I care less about the body. I mean, obviously, you're not going to smoke a really mild cigar after a steak dinner. But like my friend Rick Rodriguez, I like to smoke mild, medium, and full cigars. I had dinner before I came. This is fine. Maybe that's why it tastes a little bit more, mild to medium to me.
Yeah.
But it's a good cigar, good taste for sure.
What do you think of like the overall pairing?
The pairing is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I will overuse it time and time again on this show. It's smooth,
Yeah.
very smooth,
Just smooth.
very smooth.
That's what I was going to say. More like it's overall just delicate.
Yeah,
You know
but
what I
not not like airy or lighty. Like the cigar's got a little meat to it. I mean, for a mild to medium cigar. I mean,
I think that's why I'm saying medium.
yeah. I mean, I can see why you're more. I mean, we're getting really specific here.
Yeah.
You're towards the end of the mild to medium, spectrum here. For sure. I mean, it's closer to medium than mild, but it's got some meat to it. It's good. Yeah.
You retrohale, right? We talked about
Always retrohale.
Yeah, what do you think of
Every other puff, I try to
that. What do you think about that? Anything
retrohale.
coming from the retrohale?
Again, just it's smooth. It's not. You're not going to get that sting, coming out. So if you want a stronger cigar, this isn't your cup of tea. But
Right.
But if you want to enjoy a nice medium mild smoke, I mean, this is flavor-wise, flavor profile-wise. I mean, this one's right up there. I mean, with a lot of others that are in that range of body. So I think it's great. On the retrohale, it's very good.
Yeah.
So I'll say this too. We don't talk about this as much, but like we talk about maybe flaky ash or whatever. So the one I have is starting to tunnel a little bit. I was noticing that I'm having green light of it.
Yeah, a little bit.
Not saying, so a lot of times we'll have people that'll ask us or in the shop, they'll say, let's smoke it, they'll give it halfway through, and they're like, well, no, just give me something different. Like, they won't give it another shot.
Yeah.
Like, man, it tasted good, but man, I was like third of the way through it or whatever, and it started not like canoeing on one side or anything, but literally like there's a hole if you look at the end of the cigar,
Very
which
draining for mine.
makes it difficult to draw because a lot of that air could be flowing through there,
Yeah.
and therefore it's not moving through all the different filler leaves.
So what does canoeing mean for those that don't know?
Canoeing would be more where it's like starting to run along the side.
Yeah, we're just one side's burning and the
Yeah,
other side.
yeah, but it's not just a little subtlety. It's literally just like it just starts going, and so it's a dramatic difference there.
Mine was doing that for a little bit, but now it's good. Now that I'm like basically halfway through.
Well, truth be told, sometimes it'll like kind of block back up, like just with the heat hitting it, so it might move that filler leaf around.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of being plugged, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Where it's just like something
Too
where,
much air on one side.
yeah, just like that, and you'll see the hole when you look at the foot of the cigar as you smoke it. It'll get a little bit bigger. Sometimes it'll get back together, but when it's happening, not necessarily. I can't see it on where I cut it on the cap, but I mean, it's definitely channeling through a lot of that.
What do you think of the overall pairing, Steve?
I think it's really good. I mean, it's a lighter pairing. It's something you can do. You know, again, we talked about we're changing weather now, so it's
perfect for a night like tonight.
It's great, and it's something you can do in the summer too. I mean, there's definitely not a whole lot of spice to it, but there's a lot of flavor to it. The retrohale is nice. Overall, the pairing is really good.
Yeah, I give it like a 9 out of 10, to be honest.
It's kind of a traditional, as far as the cigar, it's got that traditional taste to it.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's not the original blend, but it definitely has that old cigar flavor to it, in my opinion. And it's just, it's nice to smoke one of those every now and again. And like the flavor's not going to hit you like, oh wow, but it's subtle but pleasant. I would say early evening cigar, you know.
So like lunch cigar. I think it's like
Yeah.
something that I don't smoke a lot of, mild and medium. I stick like either straight medium or above. So this is super light and mild for someone like me. But when I first lit it up, I was like really surprised at how it had a good draw on it.
Yeah.
It's good construction, and it's not flaky. I know some cigars, the ash just goes everywhere.
No,
you can
the
see it where
construction's good overall.
it splits and stuff, and this actually just stays in its original form while it's burning. So I think it's awesome.
And that's where I say, like, I mean, again, going on the table, Mike says his is a little bit. I think mine's probably the most dramatic. I don't think Dustin's having any issues. It looks like
One's correct.
And again, this is
Still
Kylie
smoking
was-
very well.
Yeah, Kylie was
I
nice
like it a
enough
lot.
to give these to us, so it's she's been traveling with these two.
Yeah, it's not
So this isn't straight out of a human arm. Even if she does take care of them on the road, I've had a lot of cigars from reps that they've got it in their coolador, they've got it in whatever, and they've been banged around in and out of the trunk, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So who knows? Again, it's a hand roll product. So yeah, Nate says car stock. Overall, I mean, I'm already getting past it a little bit. Besides the hole, I mean, you can see on mine it's starting to even out on the wrap.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a good cigar. I think it's a good
Yep.
pairing. I think it's a good story. I think Nat Sherman still makes some good cigars.
I think we had
They
two
do some
really
good
good
things.
stories tonight with Nat Sherman and Wild Turkey. So
Absolutely.
thank you again, Catherine and Dustin, for providing the bottle this evening for Whiskey Wednesday, and thank you. I just forgot her name. Kylie. I'm sorry,
Who
Kylie.
drove.
Yeah. Thank you for providing these cigars. We hope to get them in. I'd like to see them get in the tinderbox.
So Bob Keller has a great segue here, and I'm telling you what, we're going to quickly save this on here, and then we'll answer that. Bob.
All right, we'll be right back live.
Make sure this thing's off.
Gotta download the app, but they don't let you watch on mobile version anymore. So I'm like,
Jeez,
I hate
come
that
on.
Facebook app because there's so many freaking notifications. I mean, if texting's bad, this is bad on steroids.
Maybe you're bad.
Maybe,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I don't get a lot of notifications anymore because I don't think anybody follows it.
Segue. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You can just start talking right when you hit it.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sharing again. Saying the topic starts now.
Yep. So please share as we're paused here. You're tuned in. Please share this. If you feel comfortable and like it, and let's get this conversation going.
Fuck that. Just share it. I mean, who are you gonna hurt, huh? Why say no?
I'm just trying to be nice.
I feel so good to say yes. You can get a good look at a T-bone.
Shove
Nice
it.
stick in your head of a
What
butcher's
is that?
ass. But would you rather take? No, wait.
Take Cal's word for it.
It's got to be your bowl.
Play.
Holy shit!
I gotta edit that out, right? So the segue question is, what is everyone's GOAT? Which
Fun.
what is everyone's GOAT when it comes to cigars? So, as the author of G.O.A.T Envy, it's G.O.A.T.
The O is actually a basketball.
Well, in the
grand scheme of things.
If you wanted to look
it's
it up
circle.
on Amazon, you put the dots in.
All right, so there you go. First of all, that's where they can get the book is Amazon
Amazon, or you can go on GOATenvybook.com, all one word, and both links to the paperback and ebook are on the front page. So.
And if you're following the podcast, go to our Facebook page, click on the link. We had it, we posted it. Mike was, gracious enough to share it, so thanks, Mike, for.
Yeah, we can also post it on all the social media again after the fact, but that's great. So, G.O.A.T, what does that mean, Mike? Before we answer the question when it comes to cigars, greatest of all time, that's a tough question.
Greatest of all time.
Okay.
Overused. The word great is overused, correct? Anytime somebody goes to a restaurant, it's either great or it's bad. Why can't it be bad or average? Why can't it be average good? So greatest of all time to me means simply the greatest. There's only one.
So you can say it's great, but the greatest.
The greatest is, the EST should mean something in the word. So greatest of all time.
Well, it's funny because I'm watching this now, and even Dustin, he's chiming in on like that question alone. And that's actually a good point because he just listed off 1, 2, 3, 4 greatest cigars of all time. So again, I think that, but that a lot of people can't decide. But to your point, I think that's what the book is a lot about. It's first of all perception. No one's necessarily wrong, and that's where the conversation will get into that more. Where it's you can throw stats, you can throw whatever. But when Bob Keller asks, what's everyone's greatest of all time when it comes to cigars? That's in my opinion, it's we can all take that. What's the best selling? What's the best tasting? What's just the overall greatest based on what you consider to be good?
I would say it's a lot tougher with cigars than even in basketball. Even though basketball is a very hotly debated topic, but there's so many more cigars than there are top 10 greats. There's only top 10 great players, and most people agree on who those are. So with cigars, though, it really comes down to personal preference. And I want to say hi to Josh Susel. A friend of mine from high school, we played basketball together.
Nice.
He's a new listener, so
nice.
Hey Josh.
Thank you, Josh, for tuning in, man.
Josh, follow the page.
Yeah,
please share it.
Share it. I think the big thing, it's not your favorite is my biggest thing.
Yeah, I think with that whole statement, when you're talking about something that you like, right? Someone's asking you. It's almost like a trick question because. If you're going to give your opinion, you're already going to start an argument because whoever you say is the greatest, you already know in the back of your mind, either they're going to agree with you or disagree with you completely, and then it's just going to spark this huge debate and get into an argument.
Yeah.
But my thing is you asked me, so these are it's like we were talking about the music and the movie topics that we did. Mm-hmm. At the end of it, we were talking about what's our favorite, what's the 5 greatest artists, or what's your 5 top.
It was his favorite, though. I think
your top 5, movies. So I guess when you listen to a question like that, are you thinking about? I know, Steve, you're thinking about business and stuff like that, but I think of it as just no, it's my personal preference. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking about cigars, for instance.
Well, I think that so to qualify that, and it's not really. I'm not saying it takes all of that out of it, but when you ask what's the greatest cigar of all time? I can ask that a different way or answer it a different way. I'll give you an answer and say, and here's why. Mm-hmm. Because now I'm qualifying it based on why I think that's the greatest, not just that it's the greatest. I'm not saying it's my favorite. I can be saying the greatest of all time is, and if you had the stats, which a lot of stuff you go into, it's the #1 selling cigar. It's been around this long. It's been in this many countries. It's this many people's favorite. Because a lot of times it's Cigar Aficionado is really well known, just like a lot of the publications. To basically they grade them, and the way they do it is this is the best cigar of the year, but then it's here's why. They don't really get into it as I was rated 95, but that 95 is 10 categories at least, construction, draw, appearance, you know, even like branding, like all that stuff, even though they say it's blind.
Yeah.
So they might, I don't know if they do that, but it's one of those things where they say, here's the greatest of the year, and here's why. And then it also, just like what your book gets into, and we can get into that more, but then everyone's like, oh, that list is bullshit, that cigar is terrible, like all that stuff, like that's, yeah, okay, I mean, it's gonna help sell cigars or whatever, like that's fine, but it's like, really, that's the greatest? And you have this one not even on the list, or you have this one number 11?
Yeah.
Like that number 11 is so much better than number 2.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why?
Yeah, yeah. Well, but that's the point of a debate, right?
Yeah.
If you watch any college debate,
Yeah.
I'm thinking old school always first off, but in a college debate, they're not really trying to find out who is correct. They're trying to find out and award whoever makes the best case.
Right.
Which kind of creates an imbalance with what you're trying to accomplish in a debate, which is who's the winner. So for me, it's who's the winner, who's the best basketball player, who's the best football player, what's the best cigar. You should have some stats that come, you know, that back up your argument.
But I think with the product, it's completely different.
It is a lot different, and that you know, like I said, with basketball and cigars, I mean, you're looking at, I mean, hundreds compared to like maybe 10, you know, or 5 players.
Here's one thing that I think about when I think about like a product or like a movie or whatever, is the availability of something. Because to be honest, like, and a lot of people don't know, the BS Gold Toro is one of the greatest cigars of all time, and no one knows about it. But no one knows about it because of the availability of it. So it's like,
answer it with what I said though. It's the greatest of all time, and here's why.
well, here's why. I mean, how many? So we have 400 and some different different cigars in the shop, right, Steve?
Yeah, 500-ish.
And the BS Gold Toro consecutively is one of our top best sellers.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not 1, it's 2. If it's not 2, it's 1. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and that's not, I mean, that sometimes comes with the fact that we do back it up all the time.
Yeah.
But every time someone tries it and we go outside or we ask them how it
That's
is,
the key, though,
they
right?
absolutely love it. You know what I mean?
Not every time.
But not every time.
I've never had someone
But
tell
that's,
me, I mean, you've been
but
there
that's
a long
kind of
time.
the key, right? So you have 2 different dynamics here. An outsider might say, well, yeah, it's the best in your shop because you guys made it. You're emotional, you're attached to it.
Right.
You have bias, personal bias towards it. But really, your best assessment of how good the cigar really is,
Yeah,
trying to average out the different opinions that are outside your shop.
yeah.
And it's just the same way with the book. Yeah, my mom loves my book, so does my dad. That's great. Now, I will say
They
this.
tell you that.
My dad is extremely objective, and he has no problem telling me
Very true.
when I screw up. He loved it, so I did give some weight to that. But you know, when I get an email or you know, a Facebook message or an Instagram message from somebody that says, "I loved your book," and I have no clue who they are, that's when it means something to me.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like you said, availability. Well, I saw this one guy play in New York, on the streets of New York. I saw him playing basketball, and he's the greatest I've ever seen. Well, that's great, but you know, everybody in the neighborhood is going to love that guy. That's great. We don't know who he is.
Right.
Tell me why he is the best.
Yeah.
Tell me why he's better than LeBron or Jordan. Tell me why. So it does matter what the outside opinion is.
Yeah.
Of course, then you have the whole sheep problem. So, like I said, it's well, you know, I don't use the term sheep in the book, but when it comes to fan bases of anything, a product or a player, you know, you seek out information that confirms your feelings and your emotion and your bias for that product or that player or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Could be a clothing line, you know, whatever. But something that I've always strived to do in my own life is say, try to detach myself emotionally from the information that I read. And instead, look at sources. How many sources back up this information?
Yeah.
Is this from 123politicalgames.com, which I've never heard of, which is probably ran by some crazy person in their mom's basement,
So
or is
you.
it from CNN, like me, CNN, Fox, ABC, and okay, and within those big companies, who's the most reliable? We all debate those things, but there has to be some kind of consistency in the majority.
Yeah.
But with the ability to yourself individually not be afraid to buck the trends in order to find the truth. And I do talk about this quite a bit, a little bit later, chapter 7, chapter 8, I kind of talk about the effects of social media on the GO.A.T debate in basketball.
Yeah.
But it could span into different areas of life for sure.
Yeah.
So one of my I don't like to toot my own horn, but
Yeah.
one of the lines from my book that I liked when it came out was that there's a hunger for information, or a thirst for information, but not a hunger for truth. And so finding through and combing through the information that's out there is important. I mean, on the greater aspects of life, there's an importance level that goes beyond a simple, silly GO.A.T debate about basketball. But it's interesting to see the dynamic, across the spectrum of life, went from little importance to great importance, how it filters into every single area of our lives.
Yeah.
And I'm just fascinated with how fans debate sports.
Yeah.
And, anything else, from politics to, cigars even, whatever. I'm interested to see how people react to news. And, I'm a sheep too. We all play that role. I'm very clear about this in the book. We all play the role of that guy at times in debating. But the goal should be to try to limit that as much as possible when you're doing your research.
Yeah.
So,
Well, just for sake of argument, to answer Bob's
Yeah, I was
question.
gonna get into it.
Yeah, you mind? I'll go first. I think I'm not going to give too much reasoning, but
You have to a little bit.
okay, well,
Not go all
Yeah.
into it, but
Well,
why would you say that?
I'll say top. What do you say? Top 5.
No, greatest of all time. That's
Fine.
it.
you only get to
Just
pick one.
One great tip.
Really?
That's
just
one.
one?
It's the greatest, not
See,
the
that's hard.
most
That's
of
the
the
whole
greatest.
thing about the book, though, is that
Yes.
it's great tips. There's one,
There's one.
not just great cigars.
Gun to
Some
your
top
head,
five.
what's your favorite?
Greatest.
Well, let's take the violence out of it first of all. That's a little aggressive.
Greatest, I think,
Kinda makes-
is the Padron 1926. What's the biggest size? The number 2? Is that what we have?
No, number 2 is the torpedo.
Okay.
So we
Number
have the
4?
number 9.
The number 9 is
What
the
we
biggest.
have.
Yeah.
That's like the
But I think that's the greatest cigar of all time, just because of what the Padron family has built, and the fact that, wasn't it just was it Cigar Aficionado, the cigar of the year last year?
Yeah.
It's always on the list. That's what I mean.
See,
Like,
the
it's
64
always-
26 is on their list, and pretty much every other list, absolutely.
Yeah, it's always they made a precedent of what a premium cigar is and what it should be, and I think that's if someone comes into the shop and asks for a celebratory cigar, that's always one of the cigars that I mention. If it's not the first one that I mention, so and it always sells because it's someone's either heard of it, they know of it, they know it's great, and even if it does have a price point on it, it still makes people just go crazy over it. So I think that's enough to give it the title for me, but that's just me.
What do you think?
Well, we'll get into this a little bit later, but it's
Yeah,
important.
Michael Jordan.
when
Got it. No, we're talking about
The
cigars.
Michael Jordan cigar is
Yeah.
fantastic. It's the best.
So
It's
good.
got
It's
a
close.
Gatorade
Good.
band
Shoes are good.
on it, and it's
Tastes
infused
like
with this
lemon lime.
cologne.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. But no, the standard. What's the standard? This is what I always get to when I'm debating sports or whatever.
Not just
What is the standard for being the GOAT? Is it flavor? Is it body? Is it pairing? What is it?
But that's a
That's
great
an
point.
important thing. But for the
But
sake of
no.
we'll get that later with basketball.
I love it. No, because in your opinion,
Yeah.
what is the greatest and why? You don't have to go off the
No.
same logic as Jake. That's a great point.
Yeah. So for me, it's the Oliva V. It's been my favorite cigar for a long time. I say that with the open mind that perhaps I'm a little emotional to it now. I'm a little attached.
Oh.
I have to say, I mean, I won a contest actually. This is really funny. Back when Bentley was working for Oliva, they had a contest of what's your favorite Oliva cigar in like 4 lines or less. It was on Facebook.
Just the original.
And I put like a line about Central Park and how much I love the V, and I won it. And I won a box of Milano Maduros V's, and it was great. It was the first thing I ever won for writing.
Oh, do you like
the box?
Did you like the V Milano or the original V?
No, the V Milano is a completely different blend from the V. I don't think it should be confused just because it has the same name. But the V, to me, it's in that upper end of them. Again, you're getting very specific, medium to full range. I would say it's darn near a very full cigar, but it's not the strongest cigar out there. The flavor, the construction is perfect always. I very rarely have a tough draw on a V. The wrapper never flakes. The ash doesn't flake. Everything about that cigar, from construction to flavor, is for me it's the standard for every other cigar. There are other cigars that I love, but if I had to pick one, it'd be the V.
Yeah. And he says Bob Kell says which V. I don't know if he's asking for the size.
If
he is asking for the size, which size?
If it's a size, for me, it's the Double Toro. Now,
Why?
it's a 60 ring gauge. Normally, most of the cigar smoking community likes a little bit smaller ring gauge. You get a little bit more flavor out of the smaller size cigars. I've found that you don't sacrifice any of the flavor or the body in a big V. So for me, I'm like, I get a cigar that maybe lasts another 20 or 30 minutes. I might as well go with the bigger ring gauge. So for me, it's the 6x60, the Double Toro.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me because you brought up a good point, and I think of it 2 ways, and it's hard for me to answer. You know, what's the greatest of all time? And I'm just now getting into the Cuban tobacco a little bit more, so that's tough because I don't know what sells internationally.
You've smoked a lot of different cigars.
I have.
So you'll probably be like the most
No, I don't think so. I think
credible of the 3.
I'm also in the retail side of it too. So, again, what's the greatest beer of all time? And I'm going to tell you, well, honestly, it's probably...
Natty Light.
No, it's probably... Honestly, because of the success... No, because of success, I'd say Budweiser.
Yeah.
I mean, Budweiser is international. It sells all over the world. I mean, it might change a little bit, but I mean, greatest of all time beer...
Yeah.
Just because of the sheer size, and who knows why it got so big, or obviously the ability, the business side of it, but as far as like the greatest of all time, it's pure success of people drinking it would be Budweiser.
Yeah.
And I think 1 in 5 beers sold in the U.S. is Bud Light, is what Nate says. So, I mean, there you go. 81% of the statistics are made up on site.
He's just a load of just fucking weird statistics and knowledge.
But I would say...
I'm sorry, Nate, but it's just funny.
He just watched a commercial.
Kylie says, ugh, Budweiser. Thank you, Kylie. Tune in, watch the first part. We definitely were talking about the Epoch.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Yeah.
It's very tough because if and I'll narrow it down, but I do want to kind of talk about. I really like Jake's answer, and some people are chiming in. I like your answer too because personally, I would say I never like the Oliva V, but for me, it'd probably be either. Like the Double Robusto or the Churchill size is tough for me. Even the number 4.
Number 4 is very good.
The Churchill size is
Double
amazing.
4 I like a lot. I would say though, I mean, and I don't know the statistics, and it sounds like I'm kind of a homer a little bit on this because of our sponsor, but we always say before the BS Gold, and even now, the Monte Cristo White series.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was going to be my second.
That is a mild to medium. They call it medium, but now I read more. They're trying. Well, the classic is mild. I think this is pushing mild to medium. They've introduced some Nicaraguan tobacco into that blend, so it's actually people don't. I don't like Nicaraguan tobacco. I'll take the Monte Cristo White series.
Yeah.
And again, that's partially sheer size. You have the Cuban namesake behind it, so it sells really well. But as far as that goes, that is one cigar that I'd say it's just. And I'm trying to think of what size, but as far as blend, at least in what I've seen, and I know how much of that they sell, and Paul might say that it's not their number 1 seller, but from what I can see, the White Series is definitely the greatest of all time. And I hate to say this in recent years because I don't know all the history, but I mean, as far as right now, today, the greatest of all time would be that Monte Cristo White Series, simply because either you're like, it's a little light for me, there's not as much there, but it's good. Or it's, this hits me right. An occasional smoker can like it. Oh, it's really good. They come back to it. Then they might branch off to fuller bodied stuff. But overall, you're sitting there smoking this, and you can hand it to anyone and almost feel confident that even if like you're smoking these, and you're smoking like an Aroa CVT, and you don't have any cigars on you that day, and I'm like, I got this Monte Cristo White series. You'll probably smoke it much like we're smoking the Epoch. It's like, I forgot, this is pretty good. This is decent.
It's a great point.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, hey man, I got a bunch of craft beer, got like real like hoppy IPAs. I also have a Budweiser.
But I'll take the Bud.
Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah,
like when we're talking about a product, which is what it is.
Yeah, well, you have to bring in all the stats, and I talk about this in the book as it pertains to players is not just having a whole pie argument, not just a slice of the pie, not the slice that you want. You know how it is. Grandma brings out the pie. She cuts one a little bit bigger. You're like, I'll have that one. Mm-hmm. You don't just take your favorite slices. You have to have the whole pie, whether or not they support your opinion. But Jake brought up a obscure point a little bit, the family. And that's, again, I kind of put that with the Oliva family goes back 100 years as well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it has, it's close, with Padron, but
Padron and Oliva,
they're
so
up
hard.
there, right?
That's so hard.
But that's a good thing. But the reason why I brought up construction, I kind of threw that in there because I don't think most people would think about that when they're talking about cigars. They're usually thinking about flavor.
And the same goes with Padron, the construction of all of them.
Yeah, so
very good.
If we're going to bake cigars, I'm going to try to bring in as many pieces of the pie as I can.
Yeah.
And notably, I don't know everything about every cigar in the world.
Yeah.
I know much more about basketball, so it's kind of hard, maybe a futile exercise, but it's a fun debate. And anytime you debate anything, you should be trying to bring as many slices to the table
And drinking
as
whiskey.
you can. And drinking, of course.
Paul
and
did.
Diet Coke, thanks.
No. I smoked a cigarette.
Yeah, seriously.
Paul did say that Monte Cristo White Toro and the Romeo y Julieta Reserva Real Toro are 2 and 3 best-selling SKUs nationwide. Now, we're not going internationally at that point, you know what I mean? But he is saying the Romeo y Julieta 1875 blend Bully is our number 1. So even that is...
That surprised me. I would have figured that the Reserva Real would have been like the number 1.
I think the 1875 is just...
wasn't that the one that's in Kroger, everywhere?
Yes.
So, I mean, availability.
Availability is a big thing, and that's what he's talking about as far as the best selling. Now, again, you also are going down. So we sell the Monte Cristo White Toro for like $12.95. Okay, so now you're talking about even value there. Mm-hmm. And that's where the Padron might suffer a little bit, but that's where you're talking about just pure, take the price tags off of it, give me your best cigar. Mm-hmm. That from a manufacturer, from a grower, from a roller, give me your best cigar, and then I'll say what the greatest of all time is. He's saying the Bully is number 1, but we sell that for $8.95. Mm-hmm. Even the Reserva Real Toro is $9.95 on the shelf. So now you've got a somewhat budget stick that's a trusted name to occasional smokers, even more regular smokers, and then when you have like the other people that
even new smokers for that matter.
And he says 1875 is iconic. Unfortunately, it's sold more through catalog and internet. So again, that's something they can buy in bulk because the manufacturer's able to do it. Yeah. The other side of it is when you talk about like boutique cigar smokers, they actually will be, in my opinion, sometimes more forgiving on stuff like a tunnel, because they're not as big, and I kind of like that. Sometimes it's, sometimes I got a little floater in my beer, which I get it. They're doing it, in a smaller manufacturer. And you don't want that in a Budweiser. I'm saying like imperfect.
I probably put it down.
I'm not a beer guy, so I don't know.
You got a straight hop float in there.
I was like, what are you talking about, floater? What the?
My point is that when you get down to that debate, you have a lot of that emotion.
Yeah.
And so that's where the pure like fanboys or like either self-proclaimed or people calling them fanboys, they will go full blow to the earth's end to defend. It's like, well, the Monte Cristo White, like they don't have as many issues with their cigars, and percentage-wise, just because of the sheer volume, they don't have as many issues. Yours, they do, because they don't even have the money to be like, they're not going to necessarily put bad product out there, but at the same time, not using, you know, the same rollers necessarily all the time. They might be on the bottom, you know, packing order in the factory, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of like what we're doing with BS Gold. We've had, sadly, inconsistencies. Like we'll have a batch that's just fantastic, and then for whatever reason we'll get another batch in out of like 100 bundles of so, you know, 2,000 cigars, you'll have a larger minority of cigars that are plugged or they don't look quite right, or, you know, like the labels put on funny, and it's kind of like, we're the small guys, so not saying they put their worst guys on the job, but if they're busy that day or whatever, they're going to be like, hey, why don't you roll these? It's a Toro size, easy, you're qualified, but it's not this person over here that, you know, doesn't have a project for the top end. Like, why don't you roll these? I mean, I don't know if that's always what happens, but that's a possibility.
But there are very few things that are better than a good BS. I mean,
No, actually, I agree.
To be honest,
I love the natural.
I mean,
BS Toro. It's one of my favorite sticks.
I mean, to
If
go
I'm
off.
going in the shop, I'm buying a couple of those sticks.
I mean, to go off on like just a small, like, you know, hype tangent is the fact that last weekend we were sitting at the shop after hours at Fidel actually, and Steve, you know, leaves for probably 15 minutes or so, and we're like, "Where's he at?" Well, he comes back and he's got the bands off of 4 cigars. And to be honest, six
of us out there.
Didn't I say? I swear to God, I thought it was like a Cuban the way it looked.
Yeah.
Well, and he's been seeing more recently some of like the custom rolls and farm rolls that I brought back, and some of the guys brought back. So,
and the fact that like I thought it was a Cuban, and lighting it up, I literally thought it was a Cuban. It was interesting, and then it hit me. I was like, no, the complexity of like the BS Gold Toro, I think, is unmatched for a medium body cigar.
Yeah.
Just flat out. I believe that. But moving forward and beyond our, you know, our first half of the podcast, moving to being creative and having, you know, Mike Fry here. Thank you again for being here. I personally have a couple questions for you. How big is the book?
The book's about 140 pages.
Yeah.
Text.
And the fact that being, you know, topic tonight again is being creative. I think that is a massive, you know, success to be able to just write your own book. You know, you hear a lot of, at least I've heard a lot of people, you know, say, I'm going to write a book one day, I'm going to write a, you know.
It's a bucket list item for a lot of people.
Yeah, and for you to have done that, I think is awesome. So I, you know.
Appreciate that.
But if you could, you know, we gave not really a summary, but if you could give a brief overview of the book and what it's about, and you know what the listeners can look forward to when they look it up. So,
first off, the title of the book is G.O.A.T Envy, an analysis of the role fan narrative plays in the debate over who is the greatest basketball player of all time. The subtitle is, you know, the book's title was birthed out of an idea to be satirical. Anybody who knows me knows that I have a very sarcastic humor in me. So it kind of was birthed that way. I got the idea to write the book. First off, in my life, and this is, you know, I'm 37, so I won't say it's later in my life, but certainly past the college years, I decided that, really just discovered that I, had at least what I would say some ability to write, but really a passion to write as for my career. And this was kind of the first step to, you know, launch myself out there. I had written some scripts for film with Josh Porter that were obviously always out there shopping to see if we can get some interest in it. The film world can be tough, and I go into that a little bit in the book. But really, Nick Wright, I don't know if anybody knows who Nick Wright is listening. Nick Wright got his own show with Chris Carter recently on Fox Sports 1. It's called First Things First. And but as he was kind of coming up through the ranks at Fox Sports, he was a regular, becoming more of a regular on Colin Cowherd's show, The Herd. And it was last May, and they were talking about LeBron and Jordan, and he goes on this diatribe about why he thinks LeBron is better, but he went a step further than most of the people that I debate with on this topic for the last 10 years. Is he was going to the eye test. He was saying simply that LeBron is a better basketball player than Michael Jordan, when most fans stick to stats, just sheer stats.
Yeah.
I said, whoa, what are you doing here? And he actually said, aliens come down, you have one game that you have to win. Who are you picking? I'm like, has he not seen Space Jam?
They are talking about Space Jam 2. Did you see that?
They are.
That's social media news. I don't know if that's
Real news.
credible.
No, it's actually happening.
God damn it.
And they're saying that Michael Jordan may be involved, which I thought,
I hope he's smoking a cigar.
He smokes a cigar, I think, in the first one on the golf course, I believe.
I can't remember.
first one on the golf course?
No, he's smoking a cigar in Space Jam on the golf course.
I believe he is.
Or has one in his mouth, maybe an
I
outlet
feel like
or
he
something
is.
like
That's
that.
that 90s non-PC culture, which we all love. That
Yeah.
grew up in the 90s.
Space Jam 2, they lose in the finals. Love it. The Monstars win.
One of my
Fucking Dan
friends,
DeVito
It's a
wins.
team.
Shit.
one of my, I'll call him a Facebook friend. We've never met, but we met in a debate room on Facebook. His name's Calvin Brown. He made a great point one day. He said, at the end of the game, LeBron's going to stretch forward, and instead of dropping it in the bucket, he's going to pass it to the corner, and they're going to miss the three in there.
Come on. That's terrible.
But playful trolling. But anyway,
So he says LeBron is
when
the
Nick, right, he
greatest,
basically
yeah.
he said, now I think that the burden of proof is on the other side. Someone needs to come to me and tell me why Michael Jordan is better at basketball than LeBron James. And I said, oh, I can do that.
Here we go.
So that kind of really launched me and said, you know what, now it's time to write a book. I'd written some film scripts, co-wrote with Joshua Porter. I'd written another one, and I'm actually working on 2 now, and another book. But I said, this is one that I can get out there. I didn't try to shop it. I never sent it to an agent or a publisher. That doesn't mean that I won't now. I was trying to capitalize on the excitement of the finals, which anybody who's ever had a business or written a book and tried to market it themselves, it's incredibly challenging. Most writers are a little bit introvertish, I guess, for lack of a better term. I'm kind of both. But I don't like to boast of myself, so I hate self-marketing. So it's been a challenge to get it out there to the masses. I said, this time. It's time now. I really wanted to get it out before this last season.
Yeah.
Because I thought, I got to get all the stats for a whole season. Then I said, oh shoot, I started going into the research, and I'm like, well, it's a little bit more extensive than I thought. So I waited till near the end of the regular season this year, and really started to write most of the book then, when it came to the stats.
Yeah, later in the book you have several pages of actual stats, different
I do,
categories.
yeah.
So you get objective by just almost like vomiting, like, all right, here's all the information, now you decipher.
And that was the biggest challenge, was coming up, because if you've read the book, or if you haven't read the book yet, you'll see that I really wanted to be objective and be out front with my own bias. I grew up with pictures of MJ on the wall. I had all the basketball cards. I idolized MJ. Most people my age did.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to admit that bias up front, but I also wanted to show equally through my own stories how LeBron kind of got me to come back to the NBA. He did something that Kobe couldn't do, because Kobe, to me, when he came in at the end of MJ's Chicago career, really, I mean, they faced off in '97 and '98, even as a young buck. He was always a fraud to me. Not personally, obviously, his game is amazing. I have him on my top 5 all time. But in real time, at the time, it was, I've seen this, but it's not as good as the original. It was a copy of the original.
Yeah,
it was great, but
you say he kind of modeled it. It's
he
almost
modeled
like,
his whole game, how he talked everything after Michael Jordan,
Yeah.
which is fine.
So you're saying Michael Jordan, much like you were talking about the scars, is that golden standard.
He was that standard, and Kobe couldn't get me to really come back. Now, I was busy at the time. I was playing college basketball. I didn't have as much interest. The Browns were back. teasing us into thinking that they were going to become a good franchise again. Which
how is that this year?
It's on the uptick now, baby.
1-1-1.
It's on the uptick, baby.
Baker fever, you said.
Baker fever, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Constantly, 24/7, at least 24.
Six doctors.
I have Baker fever too, but it's usually around cinnamon rolls and fresh bread.
Well, I have that for cinnamon rolls too. You didn't know me knows that. but I kind of lost where we were. Oh, I was talking about Kobe, and how Kobe didn't really bring me back to being a viewer of the NBA again. And when I saw LeBron score 25 straight points against Detroit, Game 6, 2007, on his way to his first finals appearance, I thought, okay, this is familiar. This is Michael Jordan stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, I want to watch this guy now more. And so I started turning into the NBA. And so I talk about that in the book. I obviously get very heavy into the analysis, and I had to come up with an objective method to grade the players. There's so many stats. On basketballreference.com, just when you click on the comparison tool, I grabbed 120 different stat categories. And I thought, I think that's enough. I think this is going to be the whole game. Because for me, greatest of all time as it pertains to basketball is who's the greatest all-around player.
Yeah.
And a lot of LeBron fans will say that he's a better all-around player. MJ's just a scorer. For me, I set out to disprove that. And whether or not you think MJ or LeBron's the best, I wanted to dispel the notion and the narrative that MJ wasn't a great all-around basketball player. So I came up with a method to test the analytics and the per-game statistics and compare them. And then in order to bring in context, which is, I think, the most important ingredient, or one of the most important pieces of the pie, is context to the numbers. By adding more numbers, I added Kobe's, Magic's, and Larry's, who I think most people outside of the centers like Wilt and Shaq and Hakeem, Kareem, most people have, MJ, Kobe, LeBron, Larry, Magic as their top 5 all the time. I said, well, let's compare all their numbers to each other and see who comes out on top.
Yeah.
I won't spoil it for you, but it was very close, and I made some pretty interesting conclusions based off the data. I was surprised at times.
Really?
And it came out in a way, it was so razor-thin close between MJ and LeBron. For me personally, it wouldn't have changed my opinion either way.
Yeah.
MJ, for me, on the eye test, is the greatest basketball player I've ever seen play at his best.
What's the eye test?
The eye test is again, it's subjective though. It's your opinion.
Yeah.
But again, I've always said, my eyes don't deceive me.
Yeah.
But I'm watching play out with Michael versus LeBron, and I would even bring in Kobe into this. Michael's better than LeBron at playing basketball, and that's the point that Nick Wright was making. And I'm completely opposite of Nick Wright. I'm like, I don't know how you could grow up in both eras and say LeBron is better at playing basketball in the all-around game, especially how good MJ was on defense. So I wanted to bring in all the statistics and say, what is the best method that explains the eye test?
Yeah.
Which is really an impossible feat, but I can get as close as I can.
Yeah.
And so my comparison method, I think, like I said, to date, I haven't read anything else that brings us closer to actually, providing evidence for eye tests than my own. And again, I'm not tooting my own horn, but I'm not talking about longevity or career numbers. Karl Malone has more steals than LeBron James in his career. Is he better at stealing the basketball? I would say no. Maybe for a big man in the post, sure. But as far as the all-around game, being able to slide your feet, play basketball, and stay in front of a guard, LeBron's better than Karl Malone at stealing the basketball. I needed more context, and Nick Wright was building most of his argument, even though he was saying eye test, eye test, eye test.
Yeah.
He kept screaming longevity numbers, career numbers. LeBron has more of this. I'm like, wait, he's played like 40 more playoff games than Michael Jordan. Of course he's going to have higher numbers. So let's go into the per game and then the analytics stats. Who averages more offensive rebounds per game?
Yeah.
Who averages more steals, less turnovers? Those are the things that to me explain who's better at playing a basketball on a given night. So
you haven't even introduced the team aspect of it too. I mean, you start off the book, I know, talking about like the difference between basketball and baseball, and then you talk about like golf. You talk about boxing or fighting. You know what I mean? It's like because in the beginning of the book, he gives a great, I guess, example and almost like an ode to even our childhood, if you will, is coming to America. It's the barbershop scene where, you know, Eddie Murphy's playing, what, 3 or 4 characters. Arsenio Hall's playing 3 or 4. Have you seen this movie?
No.
You read the beginning of the book, though, so it's like you kind of see that where they're sitting around and talking about the greatest fighter of all time, and they're all talking about it, and then he exaggerates about, what was it, Joe Louis's age. Yeah, he's like, he was 75 years old, or whatever he said, you know, and it's one of those things where it's like, it's such a vast thing. You're talking about the eye test, and you have to take into consideration, when you say, like, that kid or the man on the basketball court in fucking, like, New York somewhere, playing, that never sees public. Same thing as if, like, say, Jordan had a career-ending injury in 1990.
Yeah.
And he was great from 84 to 90. He was amazing to watch, right? Mm-hmm. But the team around him wasn't good enough. Yeah. So his stats could be good, but he never got that chance to excel 91, 92, 93, 95, 96, 97, right? Was that it? Those the 2, 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where LeBron's still playing. Kobe had his career; it was an illustrious career. Yeah, mm-hmm. And he had, LeBron is still going.
He's still going, and
I just get mad at him because he's not the greatest of all time because he's been switching teams. And you're like, what are you talking about?
Again, it shouldn't be about that, right? I mean, it shouldn't be about.
It's not recess. It's not like the greatest basketball player on recess is going to be. You know what? I get all these 4 guys. They're all 4 feet tall. Yeah. And then it's just him doing it against everyone else.
I hadn't mentioned it yet, but Nick Wright said whoever comes to him and tells him, a reason for Michael being better than LeBron in basketball, do it without saying the word 6 rings. And I thought, oh yeah. I was like, that's a valid point. Because, now I'm not saying that 6 rings don't matter. To me, it matters the most. I was like, but I have to be honest, because of the team aspect, you have to then dig in and say, well, how good was MJ's team? How good have LeBron's teams been? Right. You have to dig in to provide context for the rings argument. Now, I personally believe, outside of Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan never had certainly the offensive talent to play with him around him that LeBron James had since he started, creating super teams.
Wait, you're saying Scottie Pippen wasn't?
Scottie Pippen was there. He could score.
Oh, yeah.
He's a 16-point-a-game guy in his career. Most people think they didn't know that. They think that he was 20, and he's not. He's 16. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think we can, go over a million different ways, and you for yourself, the listeners, can go and listen to this book. It's called G.O.A.T Envy, so G.O.A.T.
Read the book.
That's correct.
Go read the book. I did want to do a quote and read a quote, actually from the introduction, and even Mike said that his favorite part of the book was the introduction. He was gracious enough to send Steve and I, and even Dustin, a portion of the book.
Full book, actually.
It's the full one, so it's kind of doubled up. But there's one quote.
$3.99.
There was one quote that I absolutely loved, and I think it's page 3, and it's like the first paragraph in part of the introduction about and it doesn't have anything to do with specific sports, but it just made me think about kind of my sports past, and I'm sure it made anyone else with any kind of sports past think about it. But it said, quote, "Some of us sell merchandise to fans on their way to the stadium on a game day. Some of us are general managers or scouts. Tell the man who poured his blood, sweat, tears, and life savings in a sports apparel company that sports isn't important. Tell the single mom who referees 2 rec games per week at the community center in order to put food on the table and pay her student loans that sports isn't valuable. Tell a professional athlete or owner that sports fans don't contribute to economy," unquote. Mm-hmm. I think that passage, or that paragraph, is awesome. I'm kind of around Steve. I read the first 15 pages, just to be, related to the book, before we sat down. But that one really resonated with me out of that first 15 pages, that it has nothing to do with basketball, it has nothing to do with baseball or any other sport in specific, but the fact that you can read that, and if you have any sports background, you can think of the times that your mom or your dad or, were involved in your rec league, or, how you guys, or how you grew up through games and how you grew up through sports, whether your parents weren't there or whether they were there for every game. it doesn't matter. The memories, all that brings everything back, no matter how old you are. And I think, you know, with the topic on the side, that's, you know, to inspire in just a short passage like that, and to be that creative on something like that is kind of astounding.
I appreciate that.
So I think that's amazing, and that's really what we're talking about tonight, is the fact that creating something and being creative is, I think, anymore almost a lost art in some ways, you know, because there's so many people out there, and there's so many people that want to, you know, they want to be their own person, but they've seen things done certain ways, so this is the way to be successful. But I think truly being creative is creating something out of nothing in your own life, right? So, you know, our listeners know that I have a background in photography and videography. I used to spend 2 hours looking at all my film, whether it was going to be like a 1 minute, 2 minute, or 3 minute video. Hell, it could even be a half an hour video. You know, the longest video I ever did was 40 minutes long, and it took me 2 days to edit. And I had 65 gigabytes worth of footage. You know what I mean? And I took all of that and lumped it into this. So I think like creating something literally out of nothing is what being creative is about, and that's what you've done with this book.
Thank you. So, I really wanted to strike that tone. As I continue, I don't know how other people's writing processes go. One of the best books I ever read on writing, actually it's the best book I've ever read on writing, was by Stephen King. I'm not a big Stephen King fan. I've read a couple of his books. I love some of the films that were made from his short stories and books, like Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption. His ability to tell a story to me was unmatched. And so I said, well, I'm kind of, you know, I didn't go to school for this. I took one creative writing course my freshman year. I loved it. It's kind of, it was like, I did it.
A plus or just like an A minus? Where are we at?
In my mind, it was an A plus.
Yeah.
See, we didn't get A pluses.
Yeah, you guys had like a 4.8 GPA.
What does that mean?
Get the fuck out of here with that. Yeah, you got an A plus, but it's like, you get an A, it's a 4.6.
Well, you have AP classes in high school, you get a 5.0.
You get an A, it's a 4.
But I like the freestyle that Stephen King writes in, and his ability and willingness to break the rules of grammar and writing when he wants to make a specific point. It just really struck a chord with me. And so, but for me, I love fiction even more than I love nonfiction. So for me, I'm always trying to tell a story. And with this book, I really wanted to not just talk about why I love Michael Jordan. I wanted to discuss objectively, as much as I could be, the debate, how fans debate. And it's funny, in the middle of it, right before the analysis, I really changed tones a little bit and made it a little bit more inspirational. And it just kind of came out that way. I talk about my own faults and downfalls of trying to become a writer. Like I said, didn't go to school for it. But trying to do it with 2 kids and 2 other small business careers that I have with our family. So, you know, just, you know, trying to get published, trying to get noticed out there.
Yeah.
And so the book really is meant to, again, not to overuse the term, strike a chord with people, that sports is a romance. Your life can be a romance. You can be the GOAT of your own life in a lot of ways if you try hard and you're willing to take that next step after you've been knocked down so many times, the willingness to go for it. We talk a lot about this in chapter 5. I wrapped it up in the concluding chapter 10 as well, about not being afraid to go after your dreams. And this book was extremely emotional for me. Like I said, I've written film scripts and written short stories, and I've done a lot of writing up to this point, but written for car companies, which is never emotional. It's like, hey, you got a deal over here for $279.99. It's like no creativity whatsoever. But you know, I just, you know, looking back at my own life and walking the streets of Galena at night at 4 o'clock in the morning and trying to come up with how to balance my own personal story and something so technical as statistics and analytics per game for basketball was extremely challenging for me. And in the end, it really started to flow well. And I'm very proud of it. Like I said, I am not a guy who says I'm the best at anything. I'm very self-deprecating in a lot of ways. I think it's the best humor, to be honest. But I think our country is losing some of that a little bit. Make fun of yourself before you make fun of others. But you know, I'm very proud of how it came out, the finished product. It's really meant to make you laugh, think, definitely think, a lot of heavy analysis, but also be inspired to do things that, you know, whether it's being a writer or not, but going after it.
We had a question here. What made you want to write in general, not just this book? I know you said you were in that.
Shawshank.
Being
honest,
yeah.
When I watched Shawshank Redemption as a kid, I just fell in love with the idea of storytelling. Just the whole movie was amazing to me, from the production to the writing.
So yeah, okay.
Fantastic. Everything about it I loved. I was shocked when I found out. I was like, oh, Stephen King, that guy, he's the one that wrote the short story for that. And it was really more of a novella. But, you know, I'm just like, when I watched, I was like, wow. And then Forrest Gump came out. And then you start seeing these amazing stories being told. And I've always been a film guy.
Those are both movies, right?
I've always been a film guy first.
Okay,
always.
So that's, I mean, I think that's valid point
yeah,
to get
exactly.
across.
I never read a book all the way through college. I'll be honest. I mean, other than my Bible.
Read, though, right?
I do not read.
Okay.
I didn't read a lot.
Earlier on, you knew.
I was all, yeah, you know, by 9th grade I could read, you know, a few sentences.
Typical.
I think with
I went to Lincoln Heights, but you know, it's just
I mean that's the main thing is that you went to Lincoln Heights. And the fact that I went to Washington.
Always say yes to school.
That's right, especially if you have kids in the district. But
for property value.
yeah.
But speaking on like being creative, like what do you guys think of being creative means? Because I think a lot of people, they either get dumbed down by like their normal days, their day job and stuff like that, and they get dumbed down by like going through the motions. We've talked about that numerous times with other different subjects. But when it comes to being creative, and even, you know, Steve, you've created a cigar collaboration with Brian.
Yeah.
You guys did that. You guys created something out of nothing with your mindset on what you wanted, and it's great.
Yeah.
So and that was one thing I didn't, you know, say at the very beginning. It's about creating something out of nothing that is great, that is the GOAT per se. But it's like when you're being creative, what does that mean to you guys? What's important about it, and why should it be important to not lose that creativity? Because we're always young. When we're young, you know, the world is this big open space, and we're taught that we can do anything with it, right?
Yeah.
And then we get older and we find out the truths of what we can't and cannot do, you know, to an extent.
Yeah, you accept your limitations.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think creativity gets put on the back burner, and along with that comes the passion gets put on the back burner when reality sets in. So I just want to know what your guys' thoughts were on something.
I think creativity is right there with the skill or the talent or whatever it is that you can create. It's creativity and then also critical thinking. I think they're two very big kind of everyday aspects of life, no matter what you're doing. Creativity, you take it a lot of times, people may dumb it down. Not saying that these acts are dumb, but it's like, it's a creative outlet. So it's like, it's not necessarily like, you know, Mike wants to write this book, and if no one ever reads it, that's fine. He still did it and got his outlet. You know what I mean? He got it on paper, he's doing this, and, you know, like I said, your mom and dad and people, I'll give you $4, you know. I enjoyed it so far, I'm gonna finish the book, but the thing is like that's a creative outlook. I think you have to combine that a lot of times with the critical thinking, because when you're doing that, every life situation, you can utilize that word, you have to be creative. Mm-hmm. If you just go along with it, or you go along, you come up to a problem, sometimes you have to be, you know, involve some ingenuity to fix the problem. So there's a critical thinking, there's a creativity side of it. When you're doing from, like I said, if you want to be creative and just absolutely out of nothing, like I said, painting is, or sculpting out of clay is a great example of being creative. Whether or not people like it or not, if you are expressing yourself, you take a block of clay, you take a blank canvas, and you create something. Graphic art, same thing. You know, it's always back to art a lot of times, or or the arts like writing and stuff like that. I think you can incorporate that in business and we always talk about all different aspects of life. So you have to be creative sometimes to keep a relationship, a romantic relationship, kind of alive. If you just go along with it, it will start kind of fizzling out. But you sometimes have to be creative, to overuse that word since that's the topic.
That's
you
a
have
great
to
point.
you have to get out there. Well, yeah, I mean it's one of those things. It's almost like problem solving can lead to creativity. You have to be relevant in a sense.
I think
in
that's a
every
quote,
aspect.
man.
Good.
I mean,
I'll play it
honestly,
back,
I mean,
so.
when you think
Put
about
it in a meme.
when you think about something
I
like
mean
that,
this.
I mean, it's literally something. It's problem solving because if a problem does occur,
It can be, is what I'm saying. So creativity hits every aspect of life. So again, writing a book. Mike didn't have to write a book. He had this kind of urge, or he said, a lot of people have this bucket list thing of writing a book, or I'm going to learn how to play a guitar. Where other people look at someone that plays a guitar and is a musician as being very creative. Well, at some point, something drove them to that.
yeah.
I always go back to the story I heard about Jimmy Buffett, and I'm sure there's a lot of artists out there that he learned like 3 or 4 chords so he can get laid in college. You know what I mean? That's looking at a problem, sex. You're in college and you want to attract the ladies, and you may or may not be good looking, you're not good at sports, whatever it is. You're like, you know what?
You always know how to dumb it down, Steve.
Because that's the core of it. It's always that point where it's like you have something that you want to do, whether it's just to be, kind of something new. You're in your own rut, or you have a problem, and you have to be creative sometimes to do it. In the shop, you can literally just put cigars on a shelf or in a walk-in humidor, because that's where we kind of come back to, or on a whiskey, like the marketing side of it. We talked about the greatest cigar of all time, the greatest whiskey. Like we didn't even go into that. That would be another conversation, but we're not all as well versed on that. But the greatest whiskey of all time, or bourbon of all time.
Yeah.
In a lot of the groups that we're involved in.
I'd love to go into that.
But I mean, that's something where, again, those are one of those things is the Budweiser thing.
Yeah.
If Budweiser was a craft beer that the business side of it didn't get picked up and wasn't run correctly, and they weren't creative about marketing and getting that out there, and they weren't business savvy, then at that point, they're still in basically a small brewery or in someone's basement doing that. You think about all those things where, like, a lot of like the cigar companies too, like, that didn't have factories at first. Perdomo, my understanding, Nick Perdomo started in a garage. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like Apple started in a garage, Microsoft started in a garage.
I write in my garage.
You write in your garage, so it's like all these things where they have been proven to be what we consider creatively great.
Yeah.
And that's another argument. Well, what's the greatest of all time? Technology, like Microsoft or Apple, people will do that debate all the time. You know what I mean? It's like Mike Fry's not an Apple guy. Yeah. And I mean, I think he has the only product in here from a tech company that's not Apple.
What a dick.
I mean, when Galaxy's better, you go with the better product.
So again, you're proving my point. But the thing is again, that's where it comes into, is that the creativity is, again, what do you want to do, and then to be successful at it, you cannot just be that one personality and rule out, like, if people don't like it, they don't like it.
Yeah. No, but
unless that's your creative side being that personality, and that's your marketing strategy that happens to hit.
Well, 2 things I want to say on creativity. Flannery O'Connor was a novelist, and she said, and I'm paraphrasing, she said, by then they had experienced more than enough to last their creative life. A writer is the sum of their experience.
Okay.
And so, with anything, a small business, whatever. And I know we've talked about this several times, but believing in the God-given traits and abilities that you have, those things that keep you up at night. We talk about this in church all the time. We talk about purpose. What is God's purpose for my life? Or what is your purpose? The moment you meet your favoritism to make that thing work, and I would say the moment where you start to fly, you've got to step off the ledge first. Yeah. You've got to go out there and take the sum of your experiences. And I'm speaking more as a writer. But when I start to write, I'm thinking more like, what have I been through? What have other people been through? It's not just about stats and data. Let's tell a story here. There's a story here. And how can I infiltrate that into what I'm trying to say.
I think swim is a better metaphor because you can't fly.
Well,
Sink or swim.
Like jump off in the deep end.
Some
Like,
floaties. I'd
well,
be
no,
alright.
you're not. If your floaties will not help you fly.
Well, they won't
That's
fit me. I'm
that's-
making that.
Jeez.
But I could flap hard enough. But
He got let me fly.
Did he?
I'd like a demonstration.
You guys can't fly, right?
Unless he's white, you know.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Josh. Peanut
Gallery.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike,
Take
please.
this in front of the line.
Please.
But that's such a great quote about being a writer is, it's the sum of your experiences and being able to take that leap, and meet that. The other part of creativity that I wanted to, expound on a little bit was, first off, to that point, Seinfeld. Some people don't like Seinfeld. Maybe it's not your brand of humor. That's fine. It was very successful. Larry David's very successful because he talks about the everyday things that people do and find either serious or funny. Make them cry.
That was probably the
He
standard.
makes it all funny.
Observations, right?
Because there's.
But that was like the standard of sitcoms.
Yeah,
basically.
but that's the relatability, right? Any good sitcom is going to relate to the audience. And it's the same thing with writing. It's the same thing with the business. You're not going to be very successful unless you have a real niche for your product. And you've got to speak their language.
Yeah.
You've got to go after them, So you've got to be creative to the point, though, where you don't forget. Your experiences, don't second guess yourself, are just as important and relevant as others that you are trying to market to or write to. I think we do that a lot. We go, people are going to think that's stupid. Or, when you're down, you feel like you're uniquely, depressed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, this is a great question for that. It's very relative. Nate asked, question for Mike, what failures did you have to go through to keep the drive and passion to be creative and do what you wanted to do? 'Cause I think that's what you're hitting on a little bit right now. It's like people saying this and, that kind of outside influence.
Block it all out.
I think you had an advantage though because you're already doing two separate, basically entrepreneurial aspects of your life, so you already had the experience in doing something like that. I think it's hard for somebody that is, kind of like Shawshank, right?
Yeah.
Is institutionalized in a corporate world to get out of that, and they discover that they want to be a writer, they want to get into videography.
It's very different.
And stuff like that, and it's like,
world and
but it's like
you don't have as much ability to be creative, right? In your job, your desk job, your
right. And if you're
like do this,
but
okay,
if you
I
have
guess
that urge, right, and you're wanting to get out of it, right, you can't. Either you do it on the side at night, and then you're exhausted when you go to your day job, right, hustling, or you devote all your time to doing writing. It's kind of like, or your passion, right? I always go back to passion because that's been like my life word pretty much, as as to influence me because it's like, where's my passion at?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What keeps you up at night? What do you wake up thinking about?
Right. I think with passion, sorry. I think with creativity, there's a lot of people that say, they look at something that's great, right? Mike with your book, or, people, or with movies, Stephen King or Michael Bay or whatever. We had a movie topic, weeks ago. But you look at something that's great that has a creative background, and someone's like, oh, I want to do that. Like me, I would love to learn how to play the saxophone and, try to compose a song. That's kind of been, that's my, bucket list item, you know what I mean? Yeah. And we even have like Dave Willard that actually did write a song, went down to Nashville.
Yeah, we'd like to get him on
and
as well.
had it made, and he let us listen to it, and that's like another great feat. And I guess my point is with like creativity is someone looks at something great like that, or they listen to it, and they're like, well, I want to do something like that, but they're stuck. You know what I mean? But I think people don't realize is being creative isn't just saying, well, okay, I'm going to spend all this time, and I'm going to sit down in a quiet room and be like, now I'm going to create something.
Yeah, well,
I don't think it happens like that.
No,
I think you look at something, and it's a split-second decision where you look at something and you're like, oh, that's a great idea. That's being creative. And you talk about it or write about it or show it in a video form or whatever. I just want to point out that it just doesn't happen overnight.
Well,
if you're stuck in a situation and you want to be creative, it doesn't happen overnight. You can't just delay life and try to be creative. It happens when it happens, and you have to take the next step when you do see
Nate,
that opportunity.
Nate asked, he said, you know, did you want to say?
I just want to say, I mean, you have to look at it from a realistic side of it, right? I mean, you can't just say, you know, like that I guess, stereotypical at different generations, you know, it's like, I want to be a writer. Well, you're fucking 8, so let me tell you what, you know, you enjoy the food you're eating, you enjoy the roof over your head. All right, well, writing's not going to do that. You know what I mean? So there's the extreme that way. But I mean, to your point, it's like it's not just, you know what, I want to be creative and I'm going to learn the saxophone. It's like, cool, how are you going to pay rent this month?
Yeah, no, I
So,
know.
but then there's those success stories that are vastly outnumbered by the people that make that leap. Where it's like you hear about someone like, I'm going to move out to LA, I'm going to move to New York, I'm going to do this. And it's like you're a starving artist.
Yeah.
Is probably the most cliche
Yeah.
term,
Yeah.
which that works out for some people. You look at like a Judd Apatow and was it Paul Rudd or some of these guys were all rooming together. That's a pretty common thing with the people in the Hollywood industry. They all start in this like there's 4 of us in this apartment. We were just eating ramen noodles, and then it's like fast forward 15 years later, and they're all millionaires. That's not like a step-by-step method of how to be creative and do that.
Yeah.
So there's also the people where they do the other side of it, in my opinion, where they are working the day job, but they do dedicate, just like anything else, it's a scheduling thing, it's a commitment thing. You want to learn the saxophone, it's like, all right, well, at the very least, here's one way to do it. You look up locally, if you can, now everything's online, but locally, there might be a music teacher that will teach you how to play the saxophone.
Yeah.
So now, 2 days a week, I have this block of time after work. That's going to get in the way of family time, it's going to get in the way of other projects, it's going to get in the way in the gym, whatever it might be. But those 2 blocks of hours and the half-hour driving both ways, that's going to be my commitment. So who knows where that might go? Maybe you have a natural knack for it, but you didn't have that. You weren't steered down that. You know, my mom says, I wish you guys would have taken piano lessons at a younger age. Or my brother plays guitar, but he doesn't do it very often. He picked it up in college. He was pretty good at doing like rhythm guitar. Who knows where he would have gone if he was earlier or made that more of a goal. You just never know. There's a lot of outside factors, but I mean, I think you can be creative, but also manage your daily life. Like for you, Mike, you do stay up until 3, 4 in the morning a lot of times, just because now that's kind of where your life's gone. But you also take care of your family. And you also have a spouse and a family.
My
2 other
works
family
too,
businesses. She works. You have 2 other family businesses that you're involved in. So there's a lot of that where that will then fuel your everyday, but then you get your creative outlet that a lot of the times, I think more common than not, you somehow will start shifting. If you have success as a writer, then all of a sudden, then you have to make a choice like, is this a longevity thing or is this just a spike?
Is it?
You know what I mean? Like,
is it a bucket list thing or is it a career move?
Yeah.
That's
the publisher says, hey, here's your book deal. And you're like, damn, that's more money than I've seen in a long time. Well, a second book deal. Holy shit. And then it's like 5 years later, it's like, the last one's not good. It's not doing well. Let me know if you come up with anything else, but the deal's up. And now you're back to doing the day job. You know, so it's
from what I know of you, Mike, you're already a very creative person. Like you and your brother, which I haven't seen. You guys were talking before the podcast, and I'd love to see him soon. It's been about 8 years. But anyways, you guys, like I said before, you guys have basically an entrepreneurial background, right? And what it basically comes down to, Steve, you talk about like realism and stuff. You think about creativity, and it's like you think about the time that you spend in a day, right? And it's it will come down to that decision of whether, is this a longevity thing or is it a short-term thing? But most of the time, like if you are there are creative people and there are not creative people in a grand scheme of things. And in the very creative people, I think will reach towards that entrepreneur aspect. What I wanted to say is, Mike, you've already done that with the gym, with the humidor business. Like you guys you've created entities out of nothing, and that goes back to like my first point.
But that's the thing. That's part of what Nate was asking was the struggle. that's part of the struggle for me. We've had success in our family businesses, and we've also had months when you don't know where the paycheck's coming from.
Right.
And let me tell you something, when you have a small business, there's going to be a lot of those months. And for me, having this strong passion to write and feel like it's my calling, it's what I want to do for the rest of my life. You've got 2 kids, you've got a wife that's already working 32 hours a week. How do you balance that? And how do you finally find the goal to go for it? And that's again why I, talk about the writing process of the book in the book. This was a struggle for me. I had a lot of highs and a lot of lows just in the writing of the book. And it wasn't just because I was searching for material or content. It was what it pulled out of me. The process. That for me, the creative process was painful at times. Now, other times it's not. It's incredibly delightful. It's enjoyable. But getting the whole story, for me with this book, was an incredible challenge. I had to overcome a lot of my own self-doubts.
Sure.
And also, okay, you've had some success here in business, and you've also had failures in business.
Right.
And so that little voice, the enemy, he is always going to say, well, you're going to screw up again. Right?
Yeah.
You're going to screw up, you're going to keep screwing up, So those always speak louder than our successes if you have a tendency to crawl under the covers every once in a while and self-doubt. I went through a lot of that. And so for me, this book was my coming out party a little bit for myself, not for everybody else. It was for me. I had to come out and finally go and say, you know what, I'm ready to put my name on something that is out there.
Yeah.
And as it pertains to specifically to writing and the creative process of large, it was being able, that pulled the creativeness, the creativity out of me.
Yeah.
So like some people say
drive
like,
too though, like you had drive to that.
I had a lot of, yeah.
And that's the purpose.
A lot of drive and the purpose.
There's like a fear, there's a balance.
There's a fear of
There's a
swinging and missing.
There's a balance between fear and passion.
Well, and that's why.
Kylie said that on the feed there.
Yeah,
that's a
good
great
point. But that's where I was with this book. I can't tell you how many nights. And I'm telling you, I mean, I'm talking 16-hour days here to 18 towards the end. It was just nonstop emotion for me. And my wife will tell you, I mean, coming to bed or waking up, sometimes I just go through the night. It's 8 o'clock in the morning, she's taking the kids to school. She's like, you didn't go to bed last night. I'm like, no. I'm working through some things here, But sometimes being creative, especially as it comes to the creative arts, takes that type of work to get there. And I haven't arrived yet. I'm at the very baby steps of my writing career. But I had to come out and do it.
Yeah.
And for me, I toyed with years for writing something on my own. Like I said, I wrote with Josh Porter. We had some great scripts out there. If you're looking for a film, we've got them. But shameless plug. But I had to go and do this for myself, and you can do this. Actually, write a novel. And it wasn't meant to be the longest thing. It's a GO.A.T debate about basketball. So, it's like there's a certain level of silliness to the elements of the debate, the subject. But for me, it was something much more than that. Yeah. And for me, for Nate's question was, what did you have to overcome? The biggest failures. It was all the rejection notices. It's the times when you send stuff into a publisher and they don't even get back to you. It's like you do not exist. And when they do, they say the same statement over and over again. They never tell you whether it was good or bad. They just say, we're not looking for those types of submissions. And you're like, what in the world am I doing here?
Here's the thing that Steve said about, I love the fact that you are the best at this, at tying shit together, to be honest. And when, Steve, you're talking about like relationships and like problem solving is creativity.
Yeah.
Because you see a problem and you see a conflict, and there's really no easy answer, easy way to get out of it, or I saw the comment.
Yeah.
But there's no easy way to get out of that conflict or problem, so you have to be creative, right? And what I love about it is that, when you have people that say they see something great, like going back to what I said, you see something great and you say, well, I want to be creative, but I don't necessarily have a passion for that. I think if you're like, I think there are, like, again, there are analytical people and there are very creative people. And it's like if you're an analytical person but you have this desire to be creative and you feel it in yourself, I think it would be important for you, that person, to look at the small things and where you are creative at.
Yeah.
Where it's like something like, you know, you have an anniversary and you think about, you know, your significant other and you go to this certain place that reminds you of them or something like that, and do this certain thing that they love and stuff like that. That is being creative because you did create a moment, a memory out of nothing.
Sure.
But I will say this, and I think it is is common knowledge, is that like the best creative entities in this world, whether it be movies, writing, just stories in general, come from either hardships and pain, because you see what the world has offered you and you want it to be different. That's where like fiction comes from and stuff like that, where you have people, you know, creating stories out of nothing and creating their own fantasy worlds where it's what they want and what they would like to see within the world, or something, you know, some kind of experience.
You know, there's a point to that too. Some of the greatest, like, you know, sci-fi or whatever, you know, those fiction books, there's usually like a point to it. You know, there's ideals there. You know, it's almost like a created one, but I mean,
as a
still,
baseline, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can always relate to it. You know what I mean? You can do that.
Well, it should always accomplish something. What I found interesting in Stephen King's book was his approach to writing fiction. A lot of people ask this question, and I think this pertains to business or whatever it is that you're passionate about, being creative. You don't know how it's all going to unfold when you start.
Yeah.
In fact, and Josh knows this, my style to writing has kind of mirrored what Stephen King was. He lets his characters tell him where they want to go instead of the opposite.
What he wants them
what
to
he
do.
wants them to do.
You put yourself in their shoes type thing.
Yeah, a great, and you've heard the old cliche, making lemonade out of lemons. You know, when I watched a great movie, if you're a writer and you're a dork like me, and you love Christmas, watch The Man Who Invented Christmas. Came out last year. Great film. And it talks about the process of writing, and I can't believe why am I not remembering the author's name?
I don't know.
So what's the book called?
Who wrote the Christmas Carol? What's his name?
Charles Dickens.
It's about Charles Dickens and how he wrote Scrooge and these different characters, and how, you know, the director shows them in the room with him, and like he's talking to them. Now I don't know any writer that actually does that, you know, that isn't a little crazy. But there is an element of truth to that. When I'm in the garage and I'm thinking about what I want to write next, I'm thinking about what the characters want to say, not what I want them to say. And how they take you on a journey. And then that's, however the story unfolds, it's almost like you're listening to them and you're writing down what they say and what they do as an observer, instead of, you know, I want to say this, so I'm going to force it. Nobody's going to read your book if you force things in.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have a map for it, right? I mean, you talk about the movie side of it a lot of times. That was your inspiration to become a writer. I mean, how many movies now that some of the greatest lines or greatest scenes are almost entirely improv?
Yeah.
So you have the actors, you have the people that are creative in a sense, and they have outside influences. Now all of a sudden you have so many different heads in there. They might have heard a stagehand or, you know, like something like that. You know, so like someone bring them coffee, say, "Oh, that was really funny. You know, I'm surprised you guys didn't do this." And they're like, "Wait a second." They take it to the set, then the director sees it, and the writer sees it, and you're like, "You know what? That was actually better." Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's like there's that creative side of it where that's the almost literal, everyday, like people doing it.
And that pertains more to
characters do it.
Yes.
You've created a character that now they've employed an actor, whatever the scene is, whether it's movies, shows, whether it's theater, whatever. You know, it's one of those things where, like, you know, they just kind of come out with it. Yeah. And then it's like, wait, what was that? That was amazing. Everyone's laughing on set, or they're crying on set, and they're like, oh my God, I just want to
you're talking about creative collaboration.
Right.
And I think that pertains more than writing when you're writing a novel, it's just you. Now, if you get hired by a publisher, or you get a contract, or somebody pays you for your book, they may tell you to edit, and, you know, they have some ideas for better flow, you know, whatever. But with a a lot different. Writer writes story, and then everybody else chops it up and does whatever they want to do. And in fact, even to the point to where the actor on camera might just completely change it. It might be better though. You have to be open-minded.
Well, as an editor too, for you, I mean, you could easily give anyone in the garage or anyone listening or watching, I mean, be like, hey, take a look at these 10 pages, you know, and here's a red pen.
Yeah. You gotta be willing to give them that red pen.
All of a sudden, like, no, it's really, really good. I'm like, no, come on, like, what are you
Tell
really
me
going
what
to say?
you don't like.
There was this one part on this page that I thought, like, I didn't really get it, or I think it might be, I don't know what I'm talking about, but maybe it might be better if this person said this instead. Like, that was really a surprise. You go back and look at it, you're like, holy shit, you're right.
That's a good point.
I was, because a lot of times as a writer, I'm sure, just like anything else you're creating, whether it be, like again, in business, whether it's like a marketing plan or a business plan or just even like a simple advertisement like you did before, you're so dialed into it, and it's like you're in your garage,
you're attached,
and it's just you, and you're just this close.
This is good. I love this.
Do you remember that when, like, we've done it several times, but like when you're this versus this, it's like when you're here,
that's a good in your face.
Yeah, well, it can be, but it's like if that's all it is, you might become so inundated with the fact that it's like just what you think, and it's like, well, if that's all you care about, well, there might be a smaller percentage of people, but when actually someone reads it, they're like, what the hell is he talking about?
Yeah, but if it's fiction, it doesn't matter.
Well, fiction versus non-fiction,
it doesn't matter, but I'm
changes
saying,
that a little bit.
It's almost like you bring it back to Stephen King. It's like The Shining. It's like you're just by yourself. You go fucking stir crazy. You can read the same sentence over and over again. You're like, no, that's right. But have you ever done this as a writer? And I've done this in like emails and everything else. Like, and you like write a very basic word, and then you read, you're like, wait, no, that's not right.
Yeah. That's a good point. That's
right. No, that's not right. And now we have it like old days. You like pull out a dictionary, you're like, I was right. Like,
or you read a sentence and you're like, that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, isn't that part of the creative process though? Whether, like you said, you're starting a business or you're writing a book. It's the doubt. It's the self-doubt.
Yeah.
Right? So you hear
this
a lot.
Guessing yourself.
You hear this a lot from great authors and publishers, as they say. Immature writers will try to be too cute with their writing.
Yeah.
They come up with too much vocabulary. Before you know it, you can tell they're not showing off. They're just incredibly insecure.
But they're not themselves.
But that's the point, though. You got to stay true to yourself and your own style of creativity. And Stephen King was like, he wrote that abundantly clear in his book, is that you write what is necessary.
Yeah.
Don't get cute with it. Don't write it for somebody. You write it for you, but then you take outside opinion on how you can make it better.
See, I wanted to touch on that.
And you have to do that. And one of his great examples was, a lot of people don't like some of the language that Stephen King uses in his book. He's like, and he gave a great example. He's like, if you're writing a mobster or a gangster and they're hanging a picture on the wall and they hit their thumb, what are they going to say? Oh, fuck. Yeah, exactly. But if you write for the audience, different audiences, and you can't say, oh, sugar. A mobster or a gangster would never say that.
Yeah.
You don't know that. How many monsters do you know?
Many in my former life.
This book's going to do well then.
I was Gator in my former life. No. When is Gator? Anyway, but he's like, now, but if you're writing a grandmother that hangs a picture and she hits her thumb, she's going to say, oh, sugar, so write, oh, sugar.
Bullshit. She's not. If the grandkids are around, she's
unless she has Tourette's.
No, that's bullshit. No, they say. So, older people absolutely have less PC in them.
That's very true. That's very true. But you get the point. You don't write. Go ahead.
Nate asked, how do you get over that self-doubt? And I think that's for the table. I mean, obviously towards you and your endeavor here.
To start it out, for me, you have to ignore, like I said, I told you, block it out. Block all you think that's out there. Everything. Because the first thing that you do when you're being creative, at least for me, when I am writing, is what are other people going to think about this?
Yes.
And we can often relate to that on some level in our lives.
Absolutely.
And, it doesn't mean you want to be belligerent or crude. It just means that you've got to go, you know what, I'm going to pick a direction and I'm going there. Yeah. If something else comes along that changes that course, something else influences me, I'll be open to that. You have to have an open mind always. But I know what I want to do with this character. I know what I want to do with this chapter. I know right now I have nothing, but I'm just going to go with it, especially with nonfiction. I'm just going to go there, and then it starts to unfold.
Yeah.
But you have to have that confidence in your ability to do it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that confidence, it's going to come out jaded, wrong, incorrect, whatever word you want to use, and the audience is going to see it because they're going to know that it's not honest.
Yeah.
You have to be honest when you're right. And I think you have to be honest when you do anything, or else people are going to go, that's not real.
Yeah.
He's doing a dance here. He's doing a song and a dance. You know, so for me, it's about blocking out what you think people think.
Right.
Not just what you've heard from your past. It's what that fear of what
Yeah.
people might think about you. You have to throw that out. I've heard people have said stupid things to me that I would consider stupid in the LeBron MJ debate. Of course, when you're just debating online, it's a little bit different than when you write a book. I haven't had a lot of negativity from people who have read the book at all, really. Not one negative review yet. But I've had people that haven't read the book that have doubted me because they see my trolling online.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, it's just you on a I'm like, no, I'm a writer too, so, you know, give me some level of respect. Those are the people that I had to ignore when I started to write.
Yeah.
Every single day.
I agree with that.
So, you know, I had to ignore what I thought they would think.
Right.
I don't care. But,
We're saving it real quick for you live viewers. Thank you. As we're doing this pause, please share it. So with me, with doing, you know, Nate's question again was like, how do you overcome the, you know, the fears or the self-doubt? I'm going to give two examples because he did mention my new job, my new occupation, but my old job, I like to think I was pretty creative, and I do have kind of like a weird, hidden, like creative background. But with videography and photography, I found that, you know, I was thinking that when I go back to when I did my first video, right? And it was literally just shot on a GoPro 4 or whatever, right? And that's all it was. So it's all like wide angle lens, you know, fisheye, whatever. And I had to do something with that editing wise, right? So you have to tell a story with what you're doing, right? And that's not always the aspect of creativity, but that's what my example is. And what I had to remember was I had to take the time to actually sit down and analyze what I had shot,
mm-hmm.
right? And if you're a good videographer, a good photographer, you think of that ahead while you're shooting
mm-hmm.
the actual footage and what you want it to look at the end game, right? And I'm sure that's what you did with your writing, Mike, is you want it to look a certain way, want it to be a certain way. So you got not only do you have critics or the fear of what other people are going to think, but you're also on your own back about what you want it to look like. So for me,
editing as you go. Almost.
Yeah, editing as you go.
That's
and
okay.
My biggest thing when editing photography or film is the feeling of it. How do I want it to feel? What are you trying to say? What am I trying to say? What do I want to depict? Right? What do I want to depict as that story? And and I found myself as the better I got in videography is that the self-doubt actually kicked in more than it did at the beginning.
Oh, no, it never leaves.
But at the beginning, I didn't give a shit. But at the end game, right, it's like I have a little bit of experience, and after the first year, it's my job, right? So it's kind of like this is on the line, and this is on the line. But it's like at the end of the day, no, I think to get over the fear and to block that out, you just have to say to yourself, no, I've already made it this far, right?
Yeah, that's a good
I'm
point.
good.
Yeah.
I'm good at this. I feel it in my heart that I can do this. So with that being said, as of blocking things out, you have to actually feel where that story is going and where your own creativity lies. And that's what I want to say is creativity allows you, even the creator, to learn more about yourself than you even realize.
That's
right?
the point for my book.
And
I learned a lot.
And with my new job, that's the same thing. Is like it's entering the corporate world, the big boy job, right? Where I know nothing. I'm the youngest dude in the room. I don't know anything about finance or investments. Nothing. All this is new to me. the aspect of how the company works is all new to me. And it's like the fear of messing up and not understanding things and people making fun of me because I don't know this and that. Well, I just gotta say fuck them, because it's like it's not their life that they're trying to pursue. It's my life and what I'm trying to pursue. And my end game may be different than them.
Yeah.
Into where my occupation is now.
Yeah, have you noticed that those voices are few?
Yeah.
Right? Right?
But
they're
they
the
get louder.
loudest. They're
They
the
get-
loudest.
They're the loudest.
They're loudest in the
because-
room, but they're the fewest.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree.
yeah, that's.
I'll say this to you,
Go ahead.
Jake. I mean, you're talking about your new job. I mean, you know, everyone sees that stuff all the time, but I think some of the more current sayings right now that I think are relevant to what we're talking about is, for you, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I think that's something that if you have that hunger, if you have that creativity, whatever it might be, you know, it's always, if you want to be at the top, you know, if you're dumbing it down for yourself so you feel better about yourself, you don't really have that hunger. You don't really have that drive or I always say focus, right? And the other part of it is with the self-doubt portion. You know, you bring up a lot of times, Mike, in this conversation, Stephen King. He wrote a book about it. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the other sayings that has become more and more popular, and it can be, you know, I always applied it, and I need to apply it on a daily basis, like in the forefront for me, in the business with the cigars and everything else, but I did it more with like the fitness side of it. When 5-6 years ago, I lost the 50 pounds and I was eating a different way, and everyone was like, you know, like, what are you doing? Why don't you eat the fries? Why are you eating Subway? Or why are you eating just chicken breast? Why are you doing all that stuff? And it was so funny because I think Stephen King probably thought the same way. And when you have that moment of self-doubt, one of the things I always told that mantra of focus, but one of the things you need to focus on is how many success stories does this apply to, when it's, at first they're going to ask you why you're doing it, and then they're going to ask you how you did it. And I think that is I actually had that happen when I went through that kind of transformation in fitness and weight loss and everything else. And I think that's a lot of times when you're in it, when you're in that moment like you were in with the writing this book, and you have that self-doubt, you know, or for you, Jake, with your new job, you fast forward 5-10 years, if things go well and you stay at it and you're still pushing, and on top of that, maybe you have that creative outlet, whatever it might be, whether it be video, whether it be, you know, saxophone, who knows what's going to, quote, win out as far as the primary. But at the same time, it's when people are asking you towards the end of it, or once you've had that success, and they're asking you, like, so how'd you do it? Try to envision yourself when you're being creative and you're having that outlet, like you're doing with the writing. When you're writing this book and you're like, no one's gonna want to read this. Like, you know, what am I doing? Like, I'm wasting my time. You know, all this stuff. But you're actually achieving a goal for yourself. Again, like I said earlier, I'm not trying to belittle it, but if no one reads it, you still did it. You know what I mean? Like, you still got it out there, and you want to be proud of that.
Sure.
If it does well, that's when, again, you change from the why, when people are looking at you like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
So when you have this success, like, hang on a sec, so like, you have like 5 books that are like on the top sellers right now. Like, how'd you do it? And you go back to that moment, I think, in,
when you
in
wrote
your
for
life.
yourself.
And you said you never lose that self-doubt. You have your first book on the books, right? And it's like, you're on your 4th book in the future. You're still probably like, because I know you, and if you are that true creative person, and you don't get like ego-driven or anything like that, you're literally still sitting there like, no one's going to want to read this. What am I doing? And all that stuff. Even if you already have success. I mean, I'm sure some of the greats, Stephen King probably had that too. Even though he says it now, it's like, well, I'm going to be precise, I'm going to be to the point. Like, if they don't want it, they don't want it, and all that stuff.
That was Dickens. Dickens had a very successful book, and then it took him like 3 years, and he couldn't find anything right. And he started writing about Christmas, and back then, people were like, "Who's gonna buy a book about Christmas? Like, who cares? Like, this wasn't the Santa Claus commercial stuff yet.
Right.
It was like, who's gonna? Nobody wanted. He had to fund himself for it, basically, and go at it alone. And then obviously, it's the Christmas Carol. I mean, everybody's read it or seen some version of it on TV film.
Well,
And
I think that's well, do you have something to add?
no, that was
I didn't mean to
it.
cut
You
you
had
off.
somebody who was incredibly successful early on
Yeah.
go through that exactly what you're saying. He never lost that, and he's like, what am I going to write? And he really struggled through that book. And it's funny because I only wrote like very basic portions, like parts of the first 3 chapters before I watched The Man Who Invented Christmas.
Yeah.
When I watched it, I was like, wow. I mean, I was just so shocked that there was such a span there where he couldn't do anything. He couldn't get anything on paper.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's so true. And I felt that. And as the months went on, as the season wore down, I had to try to get all the season stats in, so I had to wait for large portions. I kept that in my mind. I was like, here's a guy who's one of the greatest authors of any time. And one of the GOATs, if there's one of. I wouldn't call him the GOAT, but he's up there.
One of the greats.
He's in the top 10. But, it's like, he also had to go through the same things.
Right.
And then when I saw at least the director's depiction of his writing process, I mean,
Right.
I don't think Dickens ever wrote a book on writing. If he did, I don't know about it. I'd like to read it. But, at least the film did a good job of depicting what that looks like. And I was like, wow, I can relate to that.
I think you're hitting on, I'm sorry, but I think you're hitting on something that I can say pretty briefly, is that a lot of the creativity process, a lot of the times, like from the core, when you were talking earlier, Jake, about, sitting down in a room and I want to learn this or I'm going to write this or whatever.
I don't think it happens like that.
Well, but you're hitting it, and that's anything too, when it comes to business, when it comes to anything else. If you isolate yourself, you may have some success. I think there's a greater percentage of success or a greater likelihood of success if you did exactly what you did. So when you're in that self-doubt, I love that question because a lot of that is part of the creativity process, unless you just don't give a fuck and you don't care if people like it or not. You're not trying to make money off of it. You're not trying to. It's just literally a hobby that is your creative process.
Yeah.
Is you actually, just like anything we've talked about this in previous podcasts, you look outside of yourself. When you get into that, again, being a writer, you already talked about that. You were inspired by something to do that. Learning how to play saxophone or be a musician. Chances are you didn't just like walk up to this foreign object with strings on it and you're like,
That looks fun.
what the hell is that?
But I think you're talking about 2 different things.
I don't. I think this is a self-doubt thing where it's absolutely, sometimes part of the creativity process is, you mentioned it with Larry David, I'm trying to kind of hone in on that. If you get stuck, if you have self-doubt or whatever it might be, open yourself up to other outlets that will feed your creativity.
Yeah, but that's different. Where I think, what did you just say? I'm sorry. You said something along the lines of that when you're in the creative process, I'm thinking of, it sounded to me like you have something that you have a passion for and you want to monetize it, right? Which is a completely different subject, right? Which is what I think is what you're trying to do, right, Mike? But you also have something where it's just a passion and it's a hobby, right? And I think
it's different. There's less pressure when it's a hobby.
Right, and I think nowadays it's something where if you want to be great at something, it needs to be either monetized or some sort of money income because of your passion, right? You're doing a service or so, it intertwines with each other.
Just because you're asking more questions as you go along.
Right.
You're thinking, how is this going to be successful?
Well, and I think that's what people, construe.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense because it's money, right? You're getting something out of your passion, your creativity. I think when we're talking about creativity, it's so important to realize that there's certain things that happen when you're on your own and your feelings are entwined with yourself, right? And that goes back to like the fact that when you're just being yourself, that's when being creative is at its peak, I think. It's just like with this podcast, right? We created something out of nothing, and we did something, in my opinion, that is out of the social norm, right? We're sitting in a garage, we're drinking, we're smoking, and we're documenting it, and we're actually creating something. But there's that other side too, where it's like, well, we're trying to monetize it to basically fund this, right? And then that's where your own fears kick in, and it's like, well, what's the self-doubt? Well, it's how do we make this better? Are we doing? Am I speaking wrong? Like when I lose my train of thought in here, I look like an idiot, and that doesn't make this podcast any better. Or it's those certain things that you have to overcome, and that's what I mean. Like when you learn more about yourself. This podcast has been something that I wanted to take. A challenge. I looked at it as a challenge because I'm not comfortable talking in front of people. I was always the person behind the camera.
Sure.
But now I'm in front of the camera. I'm in front of the mic. You're listening to my voice. I hate my voice, right? I don't know. And unlike Steve, I think everyone out of there, outside of here, everyone hates the sound of their own voice. But it's like overcoming that and trying.
I think the same thing, honestly. I mean, you think that's a common thing, but I absolutely do. I mean, I don't hate it, but I mean, it sounds different.
It's just different, and that's what I mean, though, is like going back to Nate's question.
The self-doubt question.
The self-doubt question, where it's like, how do you overcome that? It's part of just doing it and not looking at the end goal immediately, right?
Sure.
It's what we did with this podcast. Where it's
you don't know
we don't know where this is going to go. We can have
but you're never going to get to an end goal unless you open yourself up to the ability to create something.
Right.
And that's the point. I think that's what you're driving at.
Yeah, I am.
And that's what it was for me, and I think for anybody that ever does anything that's outside the box for themselves and family, whatever. And those end up becoming the best things, by the way.
I think it's about feeling yourself and expressing yourself. That's the point of it.
Well,
We're expressing ourselves through cigars and whiskey and filming it and talking about our passions in life while also talking about life experiences that I don't think has ever been done before. I'll call them out right now. We had that, what are they, ash holes or whatever? I think I'm not angry, I'm passionate. I think.
That's what an angry person says.
I don't care. I mean, like, so we discovered that they started doing these lives, right? Mm-hmm. Where we started doing this however long ago, and it's like we saw a drive or a demand for this. Mm-hmm. We saw the results, everyone listening and everything. It's awesome to see the conversations that are going on behind the scenes on this live. We've created our own community, and we didn't even set out to do that. We just wanted to be ourselves. You know what I mean? And that's what I mean by the fact that it's expressing yourself in your own way with your own passion. And I think the confidence comes when you stop thinking of the people that are going to doubt you, the people that are going to say it's bad or what that they would do differently. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then you just say to them, well, it's not your podcast, it's not your book.
Yeah, like I said,
you know what I mean?
They're few and far
it doesn't mean it can be shit, right? It doesn't mean that you don't put the statistics in. It doesn't mean that you just talk about random shit. But when you have an absolute overall fire in your belly about doing something, I think there is nothing better than that, and it really can't be stopped, so you should just go forth with it.
But by ignoring those potential voices, you now, I think, qualify yourself to be able to hear the voices that can help you. Steve was talking about that. You look for different resources to help hone your craft. That is the vehicle that you use to drive through your creativity journey, whatever it may be, whatever field. And that's, I think, an important thing. If you're afraid of what people might say, you won't seek out advice. You won't look. It's like Stephen King said: if you don't read, you're not going to be a good writer. And I was like, oh, this is the first full book I've read early in college. And I'm like, if I want to write at some point in my life, I need to start reading more. So I started reading Joel Rosenberg. I loved his books, and then Daniel Silva is my favorite writer. And then I started reading more fiction. And I'm like, when I went to this book, I started reading more fiction books that had to deal with sports, because you have to go out there and seek out help and advice, but not worry about the people who make you feel doubtful about your entire journey from the get-go.
Yeah.
Screw them, but the people that want to help you and the resources, the reading that you have to do, you've got to take that as a good thing.
We always do have this. We have this conversation quite a bit, Jake and I. We bounce back and forth, and we've had that growingness. And a lot of times I think what happens is we Jake and I with this whole thing is we're not fully on the extremes, you know, left and right, if you will. But there are times that, you know, that Jake does get so passionate. He's like, you know what? I don't care what they say. Fuck them. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like, well, I always look at it trying to, and he does that to me on the other side of it. But it's again the balance. Again, it's like we're gonna sit around. We're gonna take the time on Wednesday nights to do this at 7 o'clock We're gonna tape it. We're gonna do the mic. If we don't listen to what people want to a point, like at least read the feedback or hear people out.
Yeah.
And to your point, when you're stuck or you have self-doubt or whatever it is, if people say that and you just like, you know what, never mind, I don't want your opinion. And you're like, well, what the fuck? Like, all right, well then I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to watch. Like, there is that balance of... It's just like in business where you're doing something, like again, the cigar shop, if you look at all your Yelp reviews or all your Facebook reviews or all your Google reviews, and someone gives you some criticism, and you get worked up like that because you're like, you know what, they don't like it, fuck them, they don't have to come in here. It's like, no, hang on, just read it for what it's worth. I'm not saying like change your business model, change your everyday purpose, and like, you know what I mean, like have a complete uprooting of your life because this one person didn't like what you did that day, or what your business did that day, or what our podcast did that day. Like, just read it for what it's worth and take what you can from it, and then whatever you value that, you might actually not value it at the first point when you read it, or see it, or hear it, but it might come back. I think every opinion's valid, but you have to also, based on what it's, you know, the value of who it is coming from, and what their side of it is, or how often they're listening, or...
That's what I was going to say. It's like, what's, like, when, you know, like you said, like Steve, like I sound angry, and I've had that like my whole life, where it's like I get so passionate, I get amped up, and I start talking and everything. But it's like I'm so passionate about something, whatever we're talking about, right? And it's like there's very few times where it's like, well, you know, fuck them. Like, they don't have to listen. There's very few times where I say that, and I think that when being creative and trying to, you know, start in on your own endeavor, you know, you're so passionate about it, and things can get misconstrued as, you know, you're passionate or angry or whatever, you're mean. But it's like, in my opinion, I think what you're doing, Mike, with your book, what we're doing with our podcast, writing, I think, is still a new aspect, you know, to the world, because it's always changing, right? It's always changing, and the podcast industry is still new, and it's always changing. And it's like one of those things where we're so young, and we're so, you know, not experts on this at all, that we have the freedom to say that, well, if someone doesn't like this, and they do have everything under the book and everything under the sun to say about what they would critique about this, and we don't like it, we have the freedom to say, well, fuck you.
You absolutely do, but I mean, that's
and it's
right.
like, okay. Well, I just mean, like, I think having that freedom, and it's not being, that is aggressive, that's an aggressive way to put it, but I think having that freedom is something that is unmatched, and something that is almost taken for granted, because everybody wants the feedback, right? But I don't know, I don't think if someone is irritating you that is affecting what you want out of your entity, I think, and it's not being yourself at that point.
Absolutely.
I think that is completely wrong.
No,
and I think you have the right to say, you don't have to listen to this, you don't have to read this, you don't have to buy this, you're not going to hurt me, because I think in the end game, when we're talking about this whole spectrum of creativity in the arts world and the creative world, I think that is respected 9 times out of 10. When you are completely real, when you're yourself, when you're creating, honest, being completely honest about who you are and what you want to create, because in the end game, it's yours.
That's right.
It's ours. Steve.
I agree with that. I'm saying, like, sometimes when you go on that rant, as you call them, it's almost like I get the side where you don't want to like bow down to every like, oh, this person said this, so I have to change this. This person said that, they like this, we're gonna keep that, and you're just like constantly overanalyzing it. And that's again, I bring up the balance side of it. You're doing something creative. Again, it's always what's the purpose? Do you want to write a book that people are gonna read, or you want to say, you know what, no one liked it, I'm gonna write another one like that? It's like, cool, man, you have spare time. Like, that's awesome. I hope your wife has a good job, because now you're writing for 16 hours a day, and you're not even publishing anymore because you said fuck you to everyone. You know what? You want to read the book? No, you can't read the book because I don't care what you think. And that's where I say sometimes your rant will go to that extreme where you're like, no, I don't care what everyone thinks. I'm done with it. Like I'm saying that's the extreme. That's where I was trying to bring you back in. And it's the balance.
Oh, I'm in it. I'm in it, man.
Yeah, that's right. Turn off the camera, shut off the mic, fuck it, we're just going to talk in the garage like we did before we started this. My point is that at times you do have to change the goals because you either get stuck, you have self-doubt, or you're not succeeding, but you want to succeed. You write because you want people to read it. Mm-hmm. You want to share that outlet. If not, I'm sure there are so many authors out there that have so much self-doubt.
No doubt.
And I mean, there's stories about that. Paintings, again, sculptures, like the actual, like what they consider the arts, where like someone like passes away and it's like grandpa, we were going through his attic and all of a sudden he had all these paintings. And I mean, they were all just beautiful. And no one knew he actually did it. That's the extreme. I'm saying that, I'm not saying you're going to code on that, but sometimes that's how I'm listening to you and you're like,
oh, I know.
You're fucking at that cliff and you're like, you know what, fuck this. I'm just going to delete all this and no one can listen to it ever again, but I'm going to still talk.
You can't honestly think that
I'm saying that's where, I'm not saying you're going to do that. That's the way I think it comes across sometimes. That you're just, you get, not angry, but it's you get so passionate about it that you don't want to listen to feedback, and that's where I think a lot of our meetings, and on the other side of it, I try to put out, you know, like we try to put out a product, and so sometimes, you know, Jake will say something, same thing with, you know, once you get a publisher, and how many stories have you heard about that with writers? You know, they start a certain style, and then by their 5th or 6th book, it's like, who is this? Musicians. Mm-hmm. You start following a musician, and they're like, man, I love this acoustic style, I like this style, and then like, they put out a 4th album, and you're like, what the fuck is this? It's like a studio album, there's like now you have congos in there? Like, why do you have conga drums in there? Like, what is that?
I need more tambourine.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it's like, but you might lose that focus a little bit. I think that's the problem with it.
Yeah. My thing is it gets to the point where, and my dad's listening, I just commented as Steve, but it's like he made a joke like, I think you could have more listeners if you didn't use the F-bomb as much. Yeah, that's my dad.
And it's like, here's my point, he's still listening.
Well, my thing is...
Mr. Sanders, I'm sorry.
But my thing is, it's like, if you're not being real, if you're not being yourself, then what's the point? Because you're being creative, you're expressing, we are expressing ourselves to you, the listeners. And I get to the point where I think that, you know, we listen to feedback, and we listen to this, and we listen to that. And it's like, you know, Steve says, I get amped up. I do get amped up.
I like it. I love it.
I think it's good entertainment. People make fun of me for it, but it's cool. But I think if I did it any other way, then this wouldn't be a good podcast. I wouldn't think that I would contribute much because that's what I did at the beginning.
Yes, now you have a good podcast.
I was very, very reserved, and then I got through the comfortability issue, and that goes back to what Nate said. It's like being 34 episodes in, and this will be part of my closing remarks, is that being 34 episodes in, how do you guys keep the creativity going to talk about new topics and open yourselves up to the world? Mm-hmm. And it's like, at the beginning, I didn't really know how to open myself up to, you know, the world and everyone. And it's funny because Steve knows I'm an open book. Anyone around the cigar shop knows I'm pretty much an open book. I'm an open person, but as soon as you stick me in front of the camera and the mic, it's kind of like that camera shy, and I don't really know what to say. and there was a couple episodes there where I completely would lose my train of thought and we'd have to skip to somebody else.
Yeah.
And now I'm here, sitting here, and it's like, you know, a little bit of liquid courage where I'm able to express myself. And it's not necessarily like, if you guys don't like listening to this, well, screw off or fuck off. It doesn't matter. But my thing is like, well, what is the when do you say no to somebody? Like, do you ever say no? It's like, if you have someone being a critic, and it's like, well, what's your contribution to this? Like, what stats do you have to tell me what I need to do with this podcast, or what we need to do with this podcast?
That's where we keep going back to that balance.
And it's kind of like, yeah, I agree with the balance, but it's also like, well, I appreciate your opinion, but if you don't want to listen to it and you don't like what you're listening to, you also have the freedom as a listener not to listen to it. Mm-hmm. So my creativity overall aspect of this podcast is the fact that I love the fact that being creative is some way that people can express themselves. The problem occurs when people have fears about self-doubt or critics or people judging them. And how you overcome that is by shutting them out, by feeling your heart and creating something that you truly have passion for. And I don't care whether you want to monetize it or whether you don't want to monetize it, as long as you are happy at the end game and you feel accomplished of what you just did. I don't think that anyone else can be a critic of what you just produced. So, Mike, you have the floor.
Closing remarks. Well, first off, I want to say happy anniversary to Margaret, my wife.
Is it tonight?
We celebrated yesterday. Well,
is it tonight?
It was yesterday, but we celebrated over the weekend.
All right, Jesus, I was going to say. you bring it up now. Okay. Happy anniversary. I'll be home later, I think. Like, good night. We'll celebrate next year. Maybe.
But for me, one quote that I found interesting in my research for the book when I was trying to find, a good feel for what the fan thinks as it pertains to sports. But I think, again, this can extend into life, other life areas. Richard Gilman is a celebrated American drama and literary critic, and he articulated sports this way: being a sports fan is a complex matter, in part irrational, but not unworthy. A relief from the seriousness of the real world with its unending pressures and often grave obligations. Isn't that so true, though?
Yeah.
We root on these sports teams. I've got Baker fever. I love Michael Jordan. I hate LeBron.
Wait. Don't put those two in the same boat.
Who knows, Steve?
I do.
Anyway. But it is one of the more trivial matters of life, but yet we feel so passionate about it. And I would say that there are other things in life that are not so trivial, things that reach into our lives on a personal level, or whether we're small business owners or whether we work in government. When you debate, this was my biggest thing. And it's a bit of advice, but it's something that I found in my own research and what was pulled out of me as I wrote this book. Because I had to face my own things. I had to be willing to be wrong. And I think that we're at a time in our country in many areas where we have to be willing, when we talk about something, whether it's trivial, something that is trivial as sports can be, at least on a debate level, who's the greatest basketball player of all time, or whatever's best for business or whatever it may be. Do it with an open mind that I could be wrong, I could change my opinion based off of the data and the research. I should always have more context to everything that I research and talk about. And don't be afraid to open up yourself and be vulnerable to the point where you say, you know what, Steve, I was wrong there. I was wrong. My data doesn't, you've trumped me on this. And so with that, I think it's important for how we debate in 2018 America. And then finally on the creative process, that's the theme of the show. And the theme of the book really for me ended up being about the creative process and really being about going after your dreams, and not just the other people that bring self-doubt or criticism to you, but the voices. The voices. I'm talking about when you're quiet, when you're in your garage, and you're searching for that next sentence or that next idea, or you've just finished one and you're editing it in real time and you're thinking, oh, I don't think I'm good enough for this. Ignore it. Ignore it. Go after your passions. Write what you know. Do what you know. Research what you don't know. Try to make your weaknesses your strengths. And keep going. Every time you get knocked down, in the creative process, at least for me, as it pertains to writing, anytime you get knocked down, you must be willing to get back up and face whatever demons are out there and go for it. Because if the moment you stop being creative, that's the moment that you stop trying, and that's the moment that you don't get any success, and then your life can turn into a failure. So you have to be willing to fail, you have to be willing to make mistakes, you have to be willing to take other people's advice, and you have to be willing to be wrong at times. And then finally you have to be able to say, when you have failed, to say, you know what, I'm going to try again. I'm going to learn from my mistakes. I'm going to listen to my mom or my dad, whoever it is that speaks into your life. Those people that you know you, to lean on them for courage and advice. Do it, go after it, but don't let anything stop you from getting up off the ground and trying again and going for it. Because once you do, that's when I believe that success is even possible. And so that's it for me.
I think for you, I mean, like with the self-doubt and all that stuff when you're being creative, if it's not necessarily like sometimes you have to be creative. I always bring it back to like business and all that stuff. We talk about relationships, whether it be romantic, friends, whatever it might be. You have to introduce a level of creativity, right? But when you're doing something as pure as you have done, which is a true art, which is writing, again, I think one of the things that people will forget, we haven't really talked about it, is that your biggest critic is who? It's yourself, right? Yeah, I mean, Mike's pointing at himself here. I mean, that's one of those times where you always do that. But again, why are you who you are? Why are you self-doubt? Why are you your biggest critic? That's everything that has gotten you to that point. The inspirations, the socialization, your family life, all the experiences that you've had up until that point. That was the point that I made earlier, is that if you are in that moment, do not close out the rest of the world. Because whether you like what they're saying or not, if you like what they're saying, use it. You know what I mean? Don't mimic it necessarily. We were talking about another podcast that, I listen to a few other podcasts that I value how they do it, and I like the way that they try to get a message across, or at least they have an open discussion. If people do that from ours, I think it's flattering. Again, they say that is the most flattering thing is imitation. Mm-hmm. I think when you have that, I know Jake, you said that you close them out all the time, but I know that you don't think that all the time, because in that comment is much the same as that I try to do, and I'm not always good at it. But you can use that if you're open to listen to all that criticism. You closing it out at some point, or like blocking it out, is probably where you actually take that step. But that's actually using all that as fuel to succeed in what you want to do. And I think that there's a value there when you're being creative. Mm-hmm. Because again, if you're painting, if you're in marketing and business, you're a writer, whatever it might be, if you try, like you said, and you fail, you're failing to who?
Yourself.
Are you not happy with it? Or if you were happy with it and no one else liked it, then do you do it again? Are you done with it? Like, what is your purpose? Like with this podcast, Jake, you're absolutely right that, we started this as like hanging out on Wednesdays. We talk about this a lot. And then it was like your idea to document it. We started doing that. And then it was like, well, what can we turn this into? And then I'm telling you, Mike was on episode 1. Josh is in the garage as part of the audience. He came in. He was part of episode 1. I'm going to say this has evolved in a very good way to more of not a production, but it's more organized. It's more pointed. There's more of a purpose to it. We're over 6 months in, right? So when you hit that, 6-7 months into something, I can only imagine where it's going to be based on what we like about it, what we've got. Like Jake and I have gone through ups and downs talking about this podcast. Are we happy with it? Are we not? How much whiskey do we have? Are we happy with it or not after a lot of whiskey? Like that type of thing. it's all of that stuff, and it's constantly evolving and constantly growing, and I think that's part of the creative process. Again, a writer, your 4th, 5th, 6th book, 10th book, whatever it will be, yeah, you'll see similarities in your writing style from G.O.A.T Envy, which is available on Amazon, and all that stuff.
GoAtEnvybook.com.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have the links for that.
But that's you.
Yeah.
But that's a testament to you.
But my point is that later down the road, you're going to evolve.
Yeah.
And if you get a publisher at some point, then you're going to get someone that is in the book industry that says, no, they obviously signed you for a reason, but we also think that it might do better at this. And then that's your opportunity to take that choice and that stance of saying, actually, that's good.
Yeah, exactly.
Or actually, I don't feel comfortable with that. And then you have to make that line where, like, well, if you don't like it, then we're pulling the deal.
Yeah.
And then you make those choices and you're constantly adapting. But you never, to your point, like, don't, if you fail, get back up. Never lose the core of your creativity. Don't, like, to Jake's point, don't just do it because other people don't like it. So now you have to change what you're doing. I think all of that is very much part of the creative process. And I think this first effort from you, it was you, just you, and as you grow, now that it's out there, it's no longer just you.
Yeah.
That's the fact of the matter. That's how this works.
Yeah.
Because before you put this out there are no critics, right?
Yeah.
But now that you put it out there, now that we're putting this episode out there, coming back from it, there will be critics. There will be people that really like it. There will be people, like, critics isn't always a bad thing. It's something that, it's just feedback. Yeah, I really loved it, man. I'll tune in next week. Can I be on? Can I donate a bottle? Can I do whatever? Can I sponsor this? Whatever it might be. But I think the creative process is huge. And Kylie had a point, which again, I'll kind of circle it back. The Nat Sherman cigars earlier on were from Kylie and Nat Sherman. She made a good point, during this, is like, didn't you ask for suggestions a few episodes back? Because absolutely, that's part of the creative process. Like, what do you want to hear?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're the audience. Like,
we're doing a podcast.
And partially it's because, as you know, and Josh is here. He's in the industry of being creative and all that stuff. It's you run out of you get tapped out.
Sometimes
the oil well is done, and now you got to pick that up and put it elsewhere, and take what you learned over here, and now you got to apply it over here. And I think that's a big part of that creative process.
Yeah,
I think that's all part of the, I'll be brief, but I think that's part of the monster. And I think that some people, I dive into like my personality a lot on this. Like I said, a little bit ago, I'm an open book, but I think I come off as very spitfirey, and I am, but it's like, Steve and I get into these conversations where he's very, I would say, like, analytical, like the engineer, and I'm kind of like the architect, where it's like, a lot of the times, the points that I'm making, I think that all these other things that are assumed are, like, they're already, like, in place.
Yeah.
And my points are at face value. And then, with Kylie saying, like, yeah, we do look for suggestions. My problem with suggestions is that people, when they give suggestions, people don't know how to give suggestions.
Well, she was referring to topics and
stuff
like that. Yeah.
Well, then I'm completely off base. But
you're making a good point.
That's what I mean is, like, when people, you want to know why, like, me being creative, why we're being creative after 34 episodes, still trying to be ourselves and creating topics. It is hard.
Yeah.
We do have hard times where we sit down on a Monday evening and try to figure out topics, like, what is best that you guys, our listeners, want to listen to? What guests do people want to listen to? What can we give as a value that you guys are going to want to listen to? Because at the end of the day, now, it's still us, and it's still being us.
Yeah.
But we want you guys to enjoy it, because we believe that this is encompassing a lifestyle, something that a lot of people don't get to do all the time. But when people add a comment or try to think that they're funny or be a smartass, it's kind of off-putting. I'm just going to say that. So it's like, you think you're funny, but we're doing this for us. So that's when I get pissed. But that's my look at it. So that's just my 2 cents.
Chapter 10 of my book.
I will.
Honestly, I'll say.
But you close it out.
No, it's whatever you get out of it. If you want to be a part of this and all that stuff, if you're saying things that during the Facebook feed, if you're commenting on social media, whatever it might be, that's part of this world today. Yeah. Everyone's got a voice. We're doing this, and the only cost is obviously what we're doing and the equipment and everything else. Much like Mike, he's able to self-publish, and now because of the world we're in, he's able to put that book out there, and now it's available to literally anyone. Anyone. And in the digital era,
yeah,
you don't even have to fucking print anything. No. Sorry, Mr. Sanders. You don't have to fucking print anything. But no, I mean,
you can't even not say it.
No, that was for comedic value.
Oh, funny.
I'm pissed off. But no, my point is I like all of this. So whatever you get out of it, you get out of it. As long as you're enjoying it, as long as you play nice, you know what I mean? It's like, I think we have this Matthew Fick, who I think is new because he's asking where we're out of, and we shared it to a couple of groups. As long as you respect others, that's what we're doing here, you know what I mean? And that's all part of it. That's part of the community. That's part of the cigar shop community. That's part of the bourbon community. That's part of any of this, and that's the whole point of it. But I wanted to say I'm finishing up right now the Romeo Julieta Reserva Real, which
our
is
second cigar of the evening, provided by Altadis.
That's right. It's an Ecuadorian Connecticut shade with a Nicaraguan binder and then Dominican and Nicaraguan filler. It's one of their mildest that I know of. Very, very pleasant. It smokes well. The construction's great. I mean, all that stuff.
Good size too.
Yeah, Paul, Josh, our local guys. Paul's the sales manager who was tuning in earlier.
Josh,
appreciate it. Josh, our rep, flag behind us on Facebook. Again, thanks to Kylie. Thank you for the cigars every week from Tinderbox at Easton in Columbus, Ohio. Matthew was asking, and he's saying no disrespect, just plain trying to make people laugh. That's what I'm saying. It's whatever you get out of it, as long as, yeah, exactly, there's no disrespect ever. So that's what this is all about. BS Cigar Company, which is probably what I'm going to light up next.
Yep.
BS Gold. And then thank you to Dustin, who's kind of behind the scenes here tonight. He's been answering a lot of things on the feed, which is great. We were higher than we ever were. We were pushing 30 people on the live earlier on. And this Kentucky Spirit was fantastic.
Very good.
Fantastic.
And if you're listening, we would love to taste the barrels that came out of Warehouse K at the actual distillery, so that'd be awesome. And we might get one because she got a hold of all bottles.
I'll see what I can do to trade one too, maybe.
Yeah, so we'll get a hold of one of those. Maybe we'll do a but beyond the BS.
Yeah.
So I've kind of been lacking on that. So, but we appreciate everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Mike Fry, for coming on as third time being on the podcast, and you're always great. Again, what is the name of your book and where can they find it?
It's called G.O.A.T Envy, and it's available on Amazon. If you go to my website, goatenvybook.com, you can buy it there. The website's also on my Twitter and Instagram handles at @goat_envy. So I appreciate taking a look at it.
And if you go to our Facebook page, we have that tagged in. So make sure you go to our Facebook page at Bourbon and BS Podcast. Click on G.O.A.T Envy and read it and give it a review, man. Let us know what you think, and we'll let Mike, we'll let Mike know. But I mean, the 15 pages that Steve and I had read at the beginning, just if that encompasses pretty much what the book is about, and I can only imagine how great the rest of the book is. So we appreciate your hard work and the success that this is probably going to bring. It, even if it's not a monetary value, it's still a success to you, and a testament to who you are. So
yeah, let's make it a monetary value.
I think that's
my wife would love that.
But I think it's amazing. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Altadis Cigars, thank you for our sponsorship. Again, please share, like this, and tell a friend. Download it on iTunes, Spotify, and Overcast on Android devices.
Episode lands on Friday.
Yep, always on Fridays. Tune in next week. We also have a bottle giveaway that we're going to start this weekend with Bullet 10 year that Dustin was gracious enough to sign, or not sign, but engrave a bottle that says Bourbon and BS podcast on the back of it. We're going to do a raffle system to do that, so keep a lookout for that.
Yeah, so that'll be, we talked about, so Friday it'll start. You can start now, honestly, but it'll go through next Friday. So we'll start next episode, next Wednesday, talking about that a bit more. Have the bottle here. We'll take some pictures of it and everything like that. But we'll talk about the details on our social media on what it is. But it's going to be one of those things, like, share, all that stuff. Spread the word type thing.
Yep. And thank you, everyone, for the first timers tuning in. We appreciate you. Happy Whiskey Wednesday. Episode 34 of the Bourbon and BS podcast. Keep tuning in. Thank you. Good night.
Cheers.
Like, people say I look like a bald Matthew McConaughey.